Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're getting into some terrifying Reddit confession threads. You guys have been loving the Reddit confession thread videos, so I'm going to keep making them as long as you guys keep watching them. So comment down below and let me know if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future. But today, oh boy, we have some terrifying and horrifying confession threads. I mean, really disturbing stuff. And these are some for real confessions. I just have to leave it at that. I don't want to spoil too much, but this video will be long enough already, so please like the video, subscribe to the channel, sit back and relax, and without further ado, let's get into some terrifying Reddit confession threads. I had an affair and killed my wife. Now I'm raising our toddler alone. My wife and I met when we were in our late teens. She had an extremely traumatic upbringing and severe alcohol abuse issues with occasional drug use. She would drink to blackout and was physically violent with me during these periods, and during binges would make occasional S-word attempts or threats, and was physically violent with others. She would flirt with and hang out with other men while blackout drunk. On 3 occasions throughout our relationship, I saw her kissing other men while falling down drunk. She would constantly accuse me of cheating despite me being totally faithful. For those who will say she chose to drink and is responsible for her drunken actions, that is not how addiction works. What she did choose was to not seek help for herself and play an active role in her recovery. So ultimately, she is responsible. But her behavior while drunk doesn't hurt as bad because I know it was driven by illness. What did hurt was that she didn't address the causes of this and continued to minimize, deny, and dismiss the significance of her past on her drinking and her drinking on our lives. This was a source of conflict, but ultimately I chose to support her journey, love her, and support her as best as I could, and hope things improved over time. And as we aged and matured together, she would one day be ready to face her past and address the root causes of her drinking. As we aged, the frequency decreased, but it was still really bad. She had awful social anxiety, and we were not able to socialize with my friend group because the results would be awkward or embarrassing situations due to the excessive drinking. Bouts of S-word threats or attempts decreased significantly, but binge drinking continued and occasional violence still happened. I smoked a lot of weed, but was functional and successful in my career. I do not drink and was not physically abusive. I was emotionally abusive. For example, I would yell at her the day after she did something like run off into the night drunk and go into traffic, hit me or someone I love, and so on. It's worth noting that I grew up with an alcoholic father, and then my mom was with a man for my high school years who was alcoholic and abusive, and that my father eventually OD'd and died when I was a young adult. My wife and I moved about 2,500 miles across the country to my home city with the goal of me starting a business and us getting away from people and places that were very triggering for her. It went pretty well. She went back to work in her profession to help cover bills while I started my company. Prior to having our child, she worked but did not drive. I would drive her to work, drive to meet her at lunch, drive to pick her up. I began earning so much money that we lost more by me driving her around than she would earn. And as a couple, we were further ahead with her not working. She stopped working and said she drank because she was bored. If she was going to be home, she wanted to be a mom. She swore she would stop drinking to have a child, and she did. We got pregnant and she stopped entirely. The pregnancy was awful. The birth was complicated and mid-pandemic. We had no family support. I was busy with my company. She was overwhelmed being the 24/7 caregiver to a demanding infant/toddler. We stopped having relations or intimacy times due to her pregnancy difficulties and didn't resume due to birthing injuries. I stayed faithful and dealt with my intimate needs myself. Sidebar is that I am a very intimate person and had always struggled with our intimate relationship. At times when she would get drunk and become abusive, I would consider straying. I went as far as going for a walk with a girl once, but felt awful and told the girl I had to leave. When our son was about a year old, She was clearly feeling overwhelmed, which was very reasonable. Even the most functional person would feel overwhelmed being with an infant 24/7 with no friends, no family, and a disengaged husband. She started drinking again as a result. But at the time, I didn't see how this was a symptom of her lack of support. All I saw was that my son was going to grow up like I did, and she was breaking her promise without trying to get help. One night around 2 a.m., I heard noises in our bedroom and found her passed out drunk with our toddler crawling around on the floor. I went in and grabbed our toddler and angrily yelled, "What are you doing? If you passed out with him on the chair, you could have suffocated him," and started leaving with him. She got angry and punched me in the face and pulled our toddler from my arms. I completely lost my temper, and for the first time ever, I hit her back. I hit her like a father would hit the back of a child's head when they're misbehaving. It was fairly hard. She started crying. Something broke inside me in that moment. The level of abuse, dysfunction, my disappointment in myself for hurting her, for hurting our child, for bringing him into this environment and failing to make life safe and stable for him, it all flooded me. I had become a horrible, hateful person. I had so much resentment for my wife, my partner in life, my co-parent, that I hit her. I felt sick to my stomach, and I knew that I would never do something like this again. If I ever got near that point, I need to leave, not just the physical space, but the relationship. The next day we talked, and she said she deserved it and knew she needed to change. More of the same, not addressing the issues, but feeling shameful and swearing off drinking for a time, only to eventually build enough resentment and stress to justify returning. Infrequently, binge nights happened, but they were limited to her playing loud music, which was upsetting, but I did my best to ignore it and try to sleep. We moved to a new house in the fall of 2022, and things were good in terms of drinking. She didn't really drink at home at all. We had intimate times maybe twice a month, but it felt like a chore and seemed to hurt her. Life was a grind. I would get up, work, come home, do childcare, and she would try to see me for a bit after our toddler fell asleep. Usually, we'd be together for 10 to 20 minutes before she would wake up screaming. It was so stressful that she would sometimes not try to see me and just stay in bed scrolling for a couple of hours before sleeping herself. I could see that it frustrated and overwhelmed her too. We had zero time to ourselves. Her family was not functional and in another part of the country. My family had all passed away. She didn't want any babysitters until our toddler could speak clearly and was mature enough to share any situations of mistreatment. I felt like a paycheck. She felt like a mom robot. She was trying hard, staying sober, and she got her license and she could drive him to some appointments. I tried talking to her about driving to appointments across the city so I didn't need to leave work, but she was too nervous with our toddler in the car. She tried talking to me about being more involved and present. All she wanted from me was to get up with them at 7 to 8 a.m. They slept together in our bed, so she was alone at night and alone getting up in the morning. I slept in the basement. I would often work or game until 3 to 4 a.m. and get up around 9 to 10 a.m. I asked her to move him into the baby room, but she wouldn't because she felt anxious that she was too far away at night, unable to respond in time for a fire, wouldn't hear a medical issue, etc. I was upset that I paid for a 4-bedroom house in an expensive area and we used 1 bedroom. She was upset about my lack of support. I was upset about our lack of connection. She was too. I asked for therapy, but she refused. I started developing feelings for a coworker. I told myself that if I hit midlife and dedicated 15 years to this person and drinking was still a problem, and on top of that, I'm developing feelings for another woman and feeling like my attempts to resolve things with my wife weren't working, that I needed to end the relationship before I cheated. I brought up that I was in a really scary mental state, that I wasn't doing well mentally, and that I needed her to hear me. I needed connection. She got angry and refused to do anything until I stepped up. She brought up all the wrong I had done. The next time she drank, she played loud music while I was trying to put our child into bed. I texted her about it and she told me something like, "Now you know how it feels to struggle alone as a parent, bud." The next day, I told her I wanted a divorce. Her reaction scared the shit out of me. She was so sad and scared and shaking, scream crying, begging me to stay. I felt so fucking bad. So awful. So guilty. It hurt me so deeply to see the woman I love hurting so bad. I knew I was developing intense feelings for another woman and felt checked out. But how the fuck do I just leave the mother of my child, who has no other supports in this state? At the same time, how do I continue? I was totally tapped out. I had nothing left. I was so sad, but also so angry that she didn't go into therapy with me before, that I went through more than a decade of intense abuse and infidelity. She refused to address it, but now that something is hurting her, she is totally invested in therapy, and that I don't want to was seen by her as unfair, not giving her a chance, abandoning and betraying her. It was so hard. I told her I don't want to reconcile until I see her do the work to address the root causes of her drinking. No more caving and forgiving because of promises to be better. I need to see it first. My feelings for my coworker were getting stronger. As we worked closely together, I told myself I need to either forget about other women and totally dedicate myself to my wife altogether and accept a lifetime of struggle with these issues, or try connecting with another woman to see what it's like. I began opening up about my emotional pain to my coworker. She told me she was going through a breakup, and I lied and said I was too. I took my ring off at work so she could be more open to talking to me deeply. I thought I would wait until my wife had done some therapy and cut off the conversations with my coworker if my wife put in the effort to make progress. My wife wouldn't go to therapy solo or Alcoholics Anonymous. She said she doesn't need it and was only interested in going with me. This made it seem to me like she wasn't focused on her drinking or her trauma, only in reconciling. To reconcile, I needed her to make that shift. I was growing closer and closer with my coworker, and we started going for drives outside of work at night. My car broke down in a remote spot and it was in the middle of a cold snap in March. The tow truck was a 2-hour wait. We huddled up and I put my arm around her. I hadn't had intimate relations in weeks and was not thinking clearly. I started touching her intimately and we had intimate time. It was very fast, only a couple of minutes. As soon as it was done, the tow truck came. I took her home and went home myself. I felt sick and I went to what was now my basement apartment and cried while I cleaned myself. I reached out to a male friend who told me to deny until I die. I thought my wife would commit S-word if I told her, but I wonder if we could have worked through it. Maybe I was just selfish and a coward. Weeks went by and I did couples therapy with my wife. I wasn't able to invest fully because of my connection with my coworker. Even without her, I don't know if I would have been able to succeed in couples therapy. When I brought up the years of unaddressed abuse, resentment, and betrayal, my wife would fairly point out that it was years ago. I'm just focusing on the negative. Let's move forward. We couldn't seem to focus on and get validation about my past hurts with her, and she didn't want to do AA or therapy individually for her trauma. I stopped going to couples therapy and started engaging with my coworker more. I told my wife that I needed space to think and just to see if my feelings change. This was true in a way, but I didn't give her a fair shot at all because there was no space for my feelings to change. She stayed sober and was an absolute rock star mom and partner. I feel so fucking awful for being unfaithful to her. She caught on and started finding the evidence. She found my coworker's hair on my shirt and asked me about it. I denied it. She went through my phone records and saw I'd been calling her often. I told her I had developed a connection with her and was confiding in her. But that's it. That wasn't true. She demanded I stop. I told her I would. I did for a couple weeks, but started again. She found cat hair on my clothes one night. I denied it was due to being at a coworker's house. She found intimate stains on my pants one night. I said it was from snooking it. I mentally abused her by gaslighting her. She knew she was right, but wanted to believe me so bad, and I took advantage of that. In September of 2023, I still maintained that I wasn't dating, but that I wanted to. I encouraged her to go on dating sites and start dating, that I would watch our toddler for her so she could date others and have the romantic connection and simple human connection she craved. Unfortunately, this caused so many triggers for her that she began drinking again. It got bad, fast. I found her at home unconscious drunk during the day with our toddler running around. I told her I would have to take him away if she didn't get help. She swore that she would, but things just got worse. She started going on 2 to 4 day benders, showing up high on something, not looking, talking, or acting like herself. I was so hurt and so angry. I started sleeping at my coworker's house a few nights a week and set up cameras at home to make sure our toddler was safe while I wasn't there. She asked me for help, and I gave her a therapist's name and offered to pay for everything. I was also giving her $2,000 to $3,000 per month of spending money, while carrying all expenses except groceries. I offered to get maids to take care of cleaning and reduce the load. We reached a point where she said she needed to be out of the house and away from my clothes, my smell, my presence, so she could heal. I told her I needed the freedom to drug or alcohol test her at any time to make sure our toddler was safe. This became an emergency court action, and she eventually agreed. I helped her get a new townhouse, gave her the car, but she drove drunk and crashed it twice. My insurance covered the repairs both times, totaling $17,000. It became very scary. Her grandma died, who was one of the last people who she felt connected to. I could see a dark change in her, and she began wearing her grandma's hats and bracelets. Her other grandma died not long after, and she got even worse. I reached out to my wife's brother to express my concern, and to my surprise, he was not angry with me. He was just as scared as me, and we met to talk about our fear that she was dying. Selfishly, my thoughts were that I could never escape being the rescuer to my wife's emergencies. There was always an emergency. If I wasn't having an affair and simply ended our marriage, it would have still been a 10 out of 10 betrayal, and she still would have viewed me the same way. I think. Who knows if I'm right. I held fast and didn't end my affair to reconcile or just be a support for her. I maintained that she needed to go to AA, go to therapy, and stop going on 2 to 4 day benders, forcing me to be off work and confusing/scaring our toddler. I decided to move out in March of 2024. My wife got her own place in April of 2024. I couldn't financially manage paying my wife $2,000 per month net to help her survive while also paying for my own household and expenses. I cut my work hours from 50 hours per week to 20 so I could watch our toddler. This allowed my wife to work. My coworker and I were becoming more serious, and I opened up to my wife about the fact that I was dating her, but lied about the timeline. I said I started dating her in October. She was devastated and confirmed that I had been lying the whole time. She said she was not comfortable with my coworker being around our child until we had been dating for a year. My coworker said she needs me to be completely honest with my wife, no more lies, no more half-truths. So I was. I told my wife I'd been dating my coworker since May 2023. She was devastated all over again. She went through all the events I gaslit her about, all the lies, all the times it seemed like we were connecting, and told me that this was going to kill her. The lack of honesty and betrayal. I was her person, her husband, the one person who didn't leave her no matter how she treated me or what she did. And that in 2022, she finally started feeling safe with me. We were talking about having a second child, but at the end of 2022, I blacked out because I didn't want to have another child before the drinking issue was treated. She told me she wants me to be totally honest with my coworker, and if I was, and my coworker didn't leave me, she would meet my coworker and consent to our child being around during the days I had our toddler at house. I told my coworker 70% of the truth, but didn't tell her that I cheated on her with my wife 3 times over the course of the year. Obviously, my coworker felt hurt, betrayed, angry, sad, and demanded that I don't continue conversations with my wife. I don't go to her house. I don't play the role of her support figure. I should have said, too bad. I know it's unfair, but this is my child's mother who is in a crisis, and my primary job right now is to come clean about everything and try to help my wife get sober and healthy. I didn't, though. I tried my best to toe the line. I wanted to keep my new relationship and work my way up to being honest. I was in therapy. I FaceTime my wife daily, either to do bedtime stories with her toddler when he was at her place or vice versa. I took her food to show affection through her grieving process with her grandmother's deaths and our divorce. In mid-May of this year, I realized I couldn't do this. I'd rather be with my wife, drinking or not, and do my best to help her. Seeing her in this much pain and knowing how much I contributed and how awful it was, I knew I had to stop what I was doing. I called my mom. She lives far away, in case anyone is wondering why she was not a family support for our child, to tell her the truth about everything. My mom was very disappointed in me, but supported me in returning to my wife. I decided to sleep on it. If I still felt so strongly and so certainly the next day, I would tell my coworker that I am not sorry, but I must prioritize family. In the morning, I got a call that she had died by S-word the night before. She left a note saying that she could not handle the PTSD and nightmares from me gaslighting her. She was clear in the note that this was my fault, that I betrayed and abandoned her and left her alone during the worst time of her life. She was clear, explicitly, that I killed her. The coroners and detectives warned me not to read the notes, but I had to know. I came clean to my coworker about everything, including my intent to leave. Now I have lost my wife, the mother of my child, my person. I see clearly now how, despite her flaws and faults, and although her drinking was not my fault, the stress I caused her that often triggered her drinking was my fault. I see how much more I could have done. I see how horribly abusive I was. My wife was too, but not in the recent past. I see how distorted I was. I wake up in the night often. I cry constantly. I have breakdowns multiple times per day. I shake. I feel sick. I might as well have killed my wife myself. My child is going to grow up with no family except for me. When they are 18 and ask me the truth about their mom, I will tell them, and they will hate me. I don't need any of you to tell me how awful I am. I already know. I want to die. If it wasn't for my toddler, I would commit S-word. I now struggle day to day trying to stay alive to look after my child. I hate myself. I hate what I've done. I hate that I will never have a chance to explain to her. I hate that I slept on it. I was less than 12 hours away from making my decision while she was still alive, and I'm certain it would have prevented her death. Why? I hate that I prioritized the person I knew and dated for a year over the person I was with for 15 years, married, and had a child with. Yeah, she abused me. Who fucking cares? She would have always been there. If I put in more effort, she would have been okay. All she needed was some support. She was alone in the world except for me, and I checked out on her. Yeah, she refused so many chances to heal or address her issues before, but who the fuck cares? Why be spiteful or say should have changed when you had the chance? All that matters is that she was ready. That it wasn't on my timeline didn't warrant my spiteful withdrawal. I ruined my life. I killed my wife. I lost my girlfriend. I destroyed my family. I destroyed my wife's family. I devastated my mom, who lost a daughter and now has a shell of a son. I upped my life insurance to $3 million. I hope I die. My child will be set for life and will not have to deal with having a monster for a father. So many people tried to warn me. My coworker asked me many times if I was certain I was done with my wife. She said if I wanted to try again with her, I could, and she would wait for me. My best friend warned me. My wife begged me to give her one more chance. I am so sorry for what I have done. I don't deserve to live. And yeah, let's just sit with that for a second, because that's a lot to process. A ton of emotion in the OP's writing. This is just one of the most intense and emotional confessions or threads I've ever read before. The OP doesn't seem to be doing okay. I mean, most of the time these confessions end on a good note, but this one just kept going down and down and down, and he doesn't seem to be doing well. But let's get into some of the comments, because the OP does lay out some more issues or address some issues in the comments. So let's get into that. The OP says, I'm in therapy in a bereavement group. I needed to dump all my thoughts somewhere, and I don't want to put this on a friend. I've had some nice comments of support. I hope someone somewhere who might be in a similar situation will read my story, and maybe it'll help them pause and consider what could happen. I never thought S-word would be the outcome here. I thought I had time to try a relationship with someone stable for a while. Worst case scenario in my mind was I regretted it and asked my wife to take me back. It can happen to anyone. It's definitely not the norm, but most people who are cheated on don't die from S-word, but it can happen. And that's the reason that he outlined it here well, and the reason why I make a lot of these confession videos, because these people, or these people that make these posts, can really provide support for everyone watching now. If you're in a similar situation, you're not alone, and you can just learn some lessons from people who have already been through something, and you can just realize that you're not alone, and you know, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and you can figure out your own experience or your situation. Some other commenter says, this is one of the most haunting things I have ever read. I will never forget you. This will live with me forever now. I'll keep you and your child in my thoughts. Always. And then the OP responds saying, I also feel haunted by this, by every misstep, every choice. It is a nightmare, and I can't believe I've made such bad decisions that this is now my life. No do-overs. This is it. Every day, forever. Thank you for your thoughts. Another commenter says, my heart breaks for you, man. The only thing that's going to help you is therapy and time. You're doing the right thing by being accountable, attending support groups and individual therapy sessions, but this is a long, long road. Eventually, you'll come to understand that you're not a monster. You're just a guy that made a series of very bad decisions that, had you known the ramifications of beforehand, wouldn't have made. There was no way for you to know how your wife was going to react when you were honest with her. Stick in there. It gets better. Put in the work and be a better person for your kid. And the OP responds to this saying, thank you for this. It's interesting that when I read what you're saying, I can believe that it's true, but I don't feel it. Right now, I think any attempt I make to lighten the path feels like letting myself off the hook. My wife is dead, and it feels wrong to do anything except suffer horribly. I hope in time I experience healing and can remember all the positives about her and how much joy she brought to our family and those around her. You are right that I am a human being who made bad choices. I think that undersells the significance and impact of my behavior and how short-sighted it was, but at the end of the day, I was hurting and not thinking clearly at all. My child is my priority now. These cycles can't be allowed to repeat. 2 generations now have died prematurely to ODing or S-word. My measure of success in my toddler growing up happy, healthy, safe, and loved. And I mean, that's great. The OP is taking accountability and realizing that the best steps forward is to take care of his child and to make sure this doesn't happen again and the cycle doesn't repeat. So that's a great, happy ending. And then the OP does answer a lot of general questions, which we can get into briefly. He makes an edit saying, "Wow, I am overwhelmed by the comments here, and so I will write a general response to everyone. For those who wrote with support, thank you so much. The comments of support from strangers are oddly comforting. I am doing my best to heal. Though at this point, it does feel like recovery from this is not possible. I'm trying to take the perspective that this is the emotional version of a catastrophic physical injury, where the best outcome possible is recovering some ability and making peace with the ability that has been lost. For those who can relate, I'm sorry. If you can relate to my story, you have likely gone through a lot of pain and a lot of experience with severe mental health issues or addictions. I hope you find healing in your life. For those who wrote that this is fake, I think it would be good to reflect on why you think it's important to post comments like this. What is gained? The best case scenario is you are correct and someone is hurting so much in their personal life that they make up fake stories to get some type of connection. Someone without comfort in their life is a human being in need of help. Why would you want to prioritize catching them rather than giving them support? I checked a couple of profiles of people who wrote these negative comments about fake posts, and generally, the comment histories are intense, angry, and negative. If this is you, I hope you find whatever is missing from your life that is hurting you so much. For those who wrote hateful messages about my wife, I think only someone who has been hurt by others who have addictions can lack empathy and feel so justified in condemning another human being. I hope you're able to heal from your anger and find peace in your life. Addiction is horrible, but it is only a symptom of the pain that person has been through. Some people have enough support to heal and overcome this, but not everyone does. It is helpful, I think, to not judge people who are struggling in this way. For those who have messaged me wishing death upon me, I think only someone who has been hurt by another person in their life who has done something like I have done could be so angry that they would wish death upon me. I am sorry you have experienced so much pain in your life, and I hope you find healing. For those who ask kindly for clarification about certain points that seem unusual, my mom lives very far away, so it was untrue to say that all my family has passed away. For someone like me who grew up with grandparents, aunts and uncles, mom and dad, it feels like I've lost everyone. I understand if some of you believe you've caught some major mistake, and this proves conclusively this is a fake story, and you are entitled to that belief. It does not justify you sending messages of hate. Regarding the term coworker versus employee, I've never viewed those who work for me as less than. I go out of my way to not call myself boss or them employees or subordinates, totally outside the point of my post. I also go out of my way to avoid creating a dynamic of work where I am clearly superior to anyone else. Like the above, if you believe this is proof that my story is fake, that's okay. But again, please don't act hatefully. You can just move on from the post. And that is the last we've heard of the OP from this post and about this post. So I really do hope this OP and the OP is doing better now. And I really liked how he answered the questions at the end, because sometimes I read the comments on this video or the videos that I make and people are like, oh, that's a fake confession. And he outlined it well there. It's like, why would someone fake a confession for just some like internet pity points? I don't know. Sure, it's possible, but at the same time, why would someone spend so much time fabricating a fake story to gain pity points? I don't know. Sure, he said, believe it if you want, but I'm really glad that he answered all those questions at the end, because I'm sure a lot of you were thinking that or thinking of some of those questions. So I'm glad he provided those answers, but I really do hope the OP is doing better now. And if anyone watching is going through something similar, hopefully this added some, comfort to you to realize that you're not alone and that you can get through it. And I hope the OP is just doing better now and he can just, continue on getting better and better each day, raising his child the best he can, and just improving his life from this horrible catastrophe that I hope he can move on from and learn something from. And rest in peace to OP's wife and, everyone involved. But very, very terrifying and sad and depressing story. I just hope everyone is well now. On to the next one. I slowly became an alcoholic and it ruined my life. Male 25. Moved to California about a month before the pandemic. Came to start a small production company in the Bay Area with my longtime best friend. I met an older woman about a week before the pandemic that turned into an intense romance, and we fled the Bay Area for the SoCal desert around the second week of March. I was immediately intoxicated by the landscape and felt an incredible draw to the environment and its earthly beauty. The magenta-kissed mountains at dawn, the soft afternoon breeze, the psychedelic sunsets. What started as a 2-week stint, she returned to her parents' home to quarantine, we still remained together, turned into 9 months plus of staying there. I've always enjoyed isolation and felt it was a positive, detoxifying place for me to be after living in New York for almost 7 years. It started slow, with just a few sips of something to take the edge off and relax while watching the sunset. As the nights followed, what started as a few sips turned into glass upon glass upon glass. Frequently, if not every night, for nearly 4 months straight, finishing a half a handle. I would religiously, each night, light candles and listen to music, and it just all felt so calm. It seemed in some way to amplify the beauty of the desert environment. It helped me feel something, I guess, I hadn't felt before. Free. Although I was strictly drinking mezcal, which never left me with a single hangover, I did not realize the effects of such heavy drinking on my day-to-day cognitive function. The euphoria I would experience each night, at times almost psychedelic in nature, flowed into my everyday, and the feeling of confidence, invincibility, and what I can only describe as true happiness only grew deeper. I was running half marathons, taking some of the strongest photographs of my career, and making a ton of new friends. However, these feelings were also leading me to make extremely rash and erratic decisions, from making extremely speculative investments at huge losses, cheating on my girlfriend with multiple women, and carelessly making mistakes at my job, and withdrawing all of my life savings to purchase a piece of land in the desert. The effects of the liquor only compounded and compounded, with each decision and action being more careless and thoughtless than the last, and by the end of the summer, I'd been fired from my job, had nearly thrown away my career, was in nearly $100,000 worth of debt, and was on the brink of losing my girlfriend. Now in 2021, I've been sober for nearly 32 days, but am still just clawing back at the effects of my alcoholism from last year. I don't know what it was that drove me to drink in such excess, spend in such excess, act without any regard for the true consequences of my actions for myself and those around me. How I allowed my life to completely spiral out of control. Perhaps it was what I felt the alcohol alleviated from my lifelong battle with depression and anxiety. During those summer months, I can't remember feeling sad or anxious or lonely a single time. I can't lie. I wish, more than anything, in the world to feel like that again. I've been battling S-word thoughts more recently and weirdly fantasizing about living out the last few months of my life like that again, just to feel like that one more time. But I know I can't, because it will destroy whatever it is I have left. I am a drug addict. This is my story. For 9 years now, I've been addicted to Breaking Bad substance. I'm sorry I have to censor it, but I'm sure a lot of you have watched Breaking Bad, and it's the crystal. So yeah, it's ruined my life. During that time, I've lost my wife, my kids, my house, my job, my car, and my self-respect, and most of my teeth. I started doing crystal, and I kept it from my wife for a long time, but eventually she figured it out. She told me I had to stop immediately, or she and the kids were leaving. I agreed and promised to stop, then got high the same night. She eventually figured it out again and gave me the same ultimatum, but added that I needed to join a 12-step program. I did, and I stayed clean for a long time, but then I had a shitty day and went right back to it. She found out, and she and the kids left that night. She told me that we were done. She made it clear to me that it was them or the crystal, and I picked crystal. After they left and my wife sent me the divorce papers, I started to spiral. I started doing more, and eventually it affected my work. I fucked something up because I was strung out from the night before. It was an accident with heavy machinery. Thankfully, no one was injured, but it was company policy to drug test me, and I did not pass it, so they fired me. I got even more into crystal and would do it for days with friends at the apartment I was living in. Eventually, I needed more drugs but had no more money, so I started doing petty crimes for drug money. Then the unthinkable happened. My ex-wife was in a terrible accident and passed away. My children had already lost their father, and now they lost their only parent who was taking care of them. I was high as shit when I heard the news. I had a breakdown and I checked myself in a rehab and joined the program again. I had to be there for my children. They were living with her parents as they were the closest family. I got my act together and saw them for the first time in over 4 years. I was afraid I might never be able to get them to forgive me, but the first thing they did was hug me and cry because I looked so much better than the last time they saw me. I started working multiple jobs to save more money, but I would come by and see them every couple weeks. I worked 60+ hour weeks for 4 years, saving every penny I could, and when my son graduated last year, I told him about the money I saved for his and his sister's education. He was speechless. It was not a small amount I saved for both of them, but I lived in a shitty studio in a bad part of town, had 2 decent paying jobs, and I didn't have things like cable, internet, I'm using my neighbor's Wi-Fi for my phone, or bought anything that wasn't essential. Between the money I saved, his parents saved, and his scholarship, my son went to one of the better law schools in the country. He was reluctant to take that much money from me, and he is still angry with me for everything I have done, and rightfully so, but I'm glad I convinced him to take it. I told him that I didn't get the money because I wanted him to forgive me. I did it because he deserved better than what he got from me, and so does his sister. I'm so proud of him. He's going to be an incredibly successful someday. He's going to be a better man than I am in every imaginable way, despite the ways I failed him for so much of his life. I'm still on track with my daughter's money, and she's graduating next year. I did have to quit the second job early this year because, honestly, both jobs are very physically demanding, and I honestly just can't do these kind of long hours anymore. My doctor tells me I will probably need knee surgery in the near future because of the damage done to my knees, but honestly, I don't care if I ever walk again after next year, as long as I get my daughter her money to further her education in whatever way she sees fit. If I can do that for my children, it won't make up for anything, but it'll ensure that they will be well off. She wants to be a doctor. I just hope she can swing med school with the money I'm getting her. It'll all be worth it to see my children succeed. I'm doing better now. I'll be getting my 5-year chip in a few months. I will never use again or let my children down. I'm planning on getting a second job again in a few months after some more time of working only 50-ish hours a week just to get more money. I know my body will hate me for this, and I will have at best maybe a few years before things get worse for me physically, but it's okay. I will be fine knowing that I made sure my children will be successful and better than me. It's going to be worth it. And now let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says, "Wow, what a life, man. Congrats on the sobriety and overcoming it before it took you." Someone else says, "Thank you for sharing, bro. It's okay to fall down, but you must get up. You had your share of downfalls, but you also got the strength and rose to the occasion. I wish you nothing but success in your life and hope you find what it is you're looking for. Cheers." And since then, the OP's account has been banned, so I don't know how he's been doing. This was posted 4 years ago, so hopefully the OP is doing well now. Hopefully his kids are in college. Hopefully they've graduated from college and are doing well now. But wow, what a story of, getting down, but eventually getting back up. Seems to have ended on a good note, which is always great. I broke somebody's spinal cord and now he is paralyzed for life. When I was 12, there was this boy in my classroom who loved gymnastics I used to pick on sometimes. Me and my friends called him Girly or F-slur and stuff. One day in gym class, he was doing some kind of gymnastic twirl. I do not know what this is called in English, but is like a complicated gymnastic pose. I don't know. When I decided to push his back with my foot in order to make him fall. He fell down to the ground heavily and broke his spinal cord, which most likely will have him paralyzed for his entire life. I was not sentenced in any way due to that. It was considered an accident, and because of my young age, law might be different in my country than in the US. I just got changed to another school. I've tried to reach him and his family several times, but they do not want anything to do with me, of course. He was a boy with dreams and talent in gymnastics, and I have forever ruined his life. I have been depressed ever since. I wish I could swap places with him because he does not deserve that. Almost 3 years have passed and it feels like a never-ending nightmare. Somebody will not be able to live his life properly because I am a jerk. No one wants to be near me since then. I look forward to starting an anti-bullying campaign in the future, but nothing will ever be enough because the boy will always be in a wheelchair, no matter how much I try to redeem myself. I watched a man commit S-word. And that's not the exact title, but I have to censor for YouTube's sake. But anyways, let's get into it. I watched a man commit S-word in person right in front of me. A little backstory. I am a firearms instructor / range safety officer at a shooting range. Before any first-time guest, regardless of their shooting experience, come to the range, and before they are allowed to rent a firearm or use their own on our range, they must register and create accounts on our iPads near the front entrance, and they must watch a safety video explaining not only the rules of our range, but general universal firearm safety rules, and every guest who is not a law enforcement officer or holder of a firearms license must come with a buddy and a valid form of identification, driver's license or US ID, or a passport for non-Americans. Nobody shoots alone unless the mentioned criteria is met. And before we get into the rules, I just want to emphasize how important this is, whether or not you support guns or you don't support guns or whatever, or have shot a gun or haven't shot a gun or never want to, or you do want to. I think it's very important, and these are rules everybody should know, especially if you're in the US where guns are a lot more common, I guess. But yeah, the OP then lists 7 rules that are very important, and I myself just agree with everything said, and it's very important for everybody to know this. So number 1, always keep the firearm pointed in a safe direction. Number 2, always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. 3, always keep the gun unloaded until ready to use. 4, know your target and what is beyond / behind it. 5, know how to operate your firearm safely. Number 6, always wear eye and ear protection. Number 7, never use drugs or alcohol before or while using a firearm. Okay, so now we got that out of the way, let me explain how our range handles safety. It is always our number 1 priority. It does not matter how long you've been shooting. From a novice to a master, you, if any RSO reasonably believes you are being unsafe with your firearm, rented or owned, you will be ejected from the range, banned, and have no refund. Furthermore, prior to first-time guests entering the range, they must go through a hands-on training class on how to use firearms safely, as a fail-safe for anyone zoning out during the video. During this time, we are not only demonstrating properly and safely using firearms, but we also watching mannerisms, behaviors, and looking for red flags. Unfortunately, this person was not demonstrating any red flag behavior, so we had no idea this person had the intention of using our gun to do something horrifying. He was laughing and smiling and holding conversations with us and the rest of the staff. At around 4 p.m. on a Friday in early September, 2 men came in to rent a pistol. After they went through our first-time guest registration process, they went into the range to shoot, being supervised by myself and my coworker. There were 2 other guests shooting as well, one who I know and talk to regularly, and another who is a member of our range, but I am not familiar with. After the 2 men shot upwards of 70 to 80 rounds, the man goes up, takes a few shots at his target, takes his ear protection off, and turns the gun to commit S-word. And before I lifted my hands and yelled for him to stop, he fired a single shot And then the description gets graphic, so I won't read everything because it's just very graphic, but he commits S-word right there. He was dead before he hit the floor, and before either of us RSOs can react, his body is now on the ground with blood pooling as we guide the other shooters out of the range. We have quick alarm buttons on our walls in every range, and at the counters outside to call for either medical or police. I lift the glass on medical and hit the button. My coworker's radio. In that, we have a S-word and to have the guy at the counter call 911. We both stood over the guy's body, not knowing what else we could do or what we should have done to prevent this from happening and saving his life. What haunts me to this day is the fact that there were no indications of this man having the idea of doing something like that. Hug your loved ones, say you love them, call your family, call your friends. Check in on them. You never know what someone is feeling or thinking, and I learned that lesson the hard way. P.S. I'm fine. It was intense, but I proceeded it without lasting impact. I stayed grounded. I understood the gravity of the situation, but it didn't resonate with me on a personal level. I almost killed my stepmom. This is pretty hard for me to post. I've never talked to anyone about this. Even my wife doesn't know the full extent of it, but here we go. In 2000, my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer. She was a 2-pack-a-day smoker for about 25 years. She fought hard and was able to extend the short life expectancy the doctors gave her. I'm not sure how long they gave her. I was 10. They spared me the details. Anyways, she survived for over a year and ended up passing away in February of 2001. I remember as if it was yesterday. Her best friend came over the very next day as we were in mourning to pay respects and say goodbyes to her friend, which is normal and fine. The thing I felt weird about was that same night, the day after my mother's passing, she spent the night with me and my dad. She slept on the couch. At the time, I didn't think too much of it. Had other things on my mind, obviously. Plus, we had numerous family and friends coming by and sleeping over before her passing as well, so I grew semi-used to it. Time goes on, and it seems every other night she's sleeping over. Within the first months of my mother's death, she's finally sleeping in my dad's room with him. During this time, she was respectful and nice. She brought her 2 youngest kids a lot as well, which was nice at the time. Fast forward 3 months. We ended up moving, and she and her 2 kids end up coming with us. By this time, they are already talking about marriage, which I strongly protested, along with every single family member of mine as well. They decided to ignore me and everyone else and get married the same year my mother passed away. At first, things were the same as they were, but as time went on, she began to show favoritism to her own kids, which I guess is understandable. But to the extent that it grew was kind of disturbing. She'd let her kids get away with murder. They would taunt me, make fun of my dead mom, threw ashtrays at me yelling, "Your mom wants a hug." She was cremated, so pretty much anything with ash was fair game to use to fuck with me. A year goes by in the new house, and me being a skater kid, I frequented the skate park a lot. On my way back home one day, I ate shit. Bad. Hit a crack in the road on a very steep and large hill. I was probably going in excess of 20 miles an hour. The board stopped, my body flew, then rolled a few more feet. I was barely able to move but managed to hobble back, cradling my arm like a baby and screaming at the top of my lungs the entire way home. As I'm walking up, she intercepts me in the garage and accuses me of overreacting and tells me the quote of, "Stop being a little pussy." I knew there was something wrong with my arm, considering I was physically unable to move it at all. But she wouldn't listen to me, and my dad wasn't home from work yet either. For hours, I waited for him to show up, and when he does, it turned out my SM had already talked to him, so he wouldn't listen either. And I think SM is stepmom. The next day was a school day. I remember this because I was awoken by my stepmom, little cretin of a son, throwing my full backpack onto my chest to wake me up. I woke up screaming. Stepmom comes running into the room and promptly tells me to shut the fuck up, you're not hurt. Stop faking because you're going to school. Well, I couldn't stop. I was in agony. I was still holding my arm like a baby, so she punched my bicep. in the fashion friends, what I guess you could call, and said, I'm taking your dumbass to the hospital just to make sure you feel stupid when they tell you nothing is wrong. Well, upon seeing the doctor, he almost immediately says, yup, your shoulder is broken. I can tell by the way your arm instinctively supporting your arm. SM was silent. Doctor set up x-rays. Turns out my collarbone was completely shattered. Proved her wrong, but it only fueled her rage more, it seemed. She became spiteful. Took away all my skateboards, bikes, anything that I could ride. My arm was in a sling anyway, so it wasn't like I could use them anyways. But she had no intent on giving them back to me. In fact, she gave them to her own son. Even my own dad said it was for the best because I've shown to be irresponsible with them and can't use them correctly. Only thing I was able to do was play video games. Barely. Considering my arm was completely bundled up. Another few months go by and my arm is healing up good. And we all go on an easy hike in the desert. We find and pick up some wild cactus apples. Excited and eager, I start eating one with the help of my dad. Turns out there were little mites in the fruit, and I contracted scabies. Half of my face swells up in the most morbid of ways. I couldn't talk right, couldn't open one of my eyes. I was fucked up. My older sister, that I just realized I haven't mentioned at all yet in this post, came to visit me with my two nephews. Drove 3 hours just to hang out with me and see how I'm doing. As soon as she sees my gruesome, swollen face, she screams in terror, grabs her kids and leaves. Needless to say, it made me feel like more shit, but I understand. She calls my dad, urging him to take me to the hospital, but stepmom refuses again, saying it's not that bad and that all I need is a nice, warm washcloth. Well, 2 weeks go by, swelling is reduced, but not completely gone. Sister threatens to call the cops if they don't do something. So stepmom again tries saying she's gonna feel dumb when it turns out to be nothing. Well, this time doctors say at this point, they can't tell what it is. Scabies was the most likely considering the symptoms I'm told. That I should have been there 2 weeks prior when I couldn't open my eye. Stepmom takes this as a win. More time goes by, more shit happens with stepmom. CPS is called and I'm interviewed. Nothing happens with that. Holidays were ruined by her kids, yet I was to blame. I ended up basically being the Cinderella of my house at this point. My bed was even moved into the laundry room. 1 year, the pipe burst and my room flooded up to 8 inches. Nothing was done about that. Eventually, when I was about 14 years old, I worked up the courage to tell my dad what I thought about her and how she treats me. Well, I guess by this time, he was so tainted by her that he began talking like her. He said, "Get over it. She's not mean. You're just trying to antagonize for the sake of drama." I told him if that's how he feels, then I'm moving out to live with my sister. My sister agrees and I move out. Life was good for a bit, till I started missing my dad. I felt like I failed him, so after 2 years living with my sister, I decided to move back in with my dad. Almost on arrival, my stepmom starts her shit all over again. Comments like, "Great, more unneeded doctor visits," or "No skateboarding, don't want your sister calling the CPS again." It was actually my aunt that called, I found out years later. On the day before my 17th birthday, I will never forget the words that came out of her mouth. I was getting breakfast and made a comment on how the house was starting to reek with a cigarette smoke smell. I'll admit at this point I was a bit snarky, but I said it to myself. Stepmom wasn't in the room, but she heard me all right. She storms in and tells me, "If you don't like it, then go back to your sister's house. Or did she kick your whiny ass out, and that's why you're back?" I snapped and told her to fuck off and to commit S-word. She walked up to me and looked down at me. She's a good foot taller than I am. I'm pretty damn short. And says, "You do it. I fucking dare you." I stare at her in disbelief and she just starts laughing. "Fucking pussy, you're weak. Just like your mom." At this point, I have a death grip on my fork with every intention of sticking it in her throat, but I don't. I keep quiet and continue eating my breakfast. That was the first of many comments about my mom. Seems she took a page from her own kids that used to say the very similar insults. Only thing is, she was supposedly my mom's best friend. I call her out on this and she tells me to fuck off and die. Because of the years of mental abuse, I become depressed. S-word was on my mind a lot, and she knew it. She egged me on, telling me to say hi to my mom in hell when I get there. She would get drunk and say the most horrible things like, "I hope Satan makes your mom put cigarette butts out on your face for eternity." After a while of this, I made I can't say this word on YouTube, but he made a rope to commit S-word with, measured the rope and tied it to a wooden beam on my ceiling. One night, I tried to commit S-word. The wooden beam above me broke, and obviously I survived. I took this as a sign that maybe I'm not the one that needs to die. Eventually, I end up finding my dad's gun after a few days of snooping in his room when no one was home. I hid it in my room and kept telling myself on repeat, "Next time she's blind drunk." Well, a friend came over one night and we began talking a bit. I told him I was fed up and that I had a plan. I didn't go into details, but he's a smart person. He was able to figure out what I was planning pretty easily. He began crying to me. He pled for me not to go through with anything and to move back into my sister's house. This went on for quite a bit, but eventually he talked me out of it. I showed him the gun and he snatched it so fast and took off out of my house and down the road to the lake. He tossed that motherfucker as hard as he could into the water. Somehow seeing that made me feel better. Anyways, I realize this is pretty anticlimactic, but after that, I just ended up moving back in with my sister. No one in the family has any contact with my dad or his wife anymore, and at this point, I think that's his choice. It's been over 10 years since then. I've moved across the country to numerous different states. I've made a career and name for myself. I got married to my dream girl, and we have the best little girl together. Things could not be better. Last I heard, stepmom's two youngest are in rehab centers, and stepmom had a massive heart attack that almost killed her. Surprised me that she even has a heart. Karma, I'm guessing. Anyways, that's my life. Laid it all out in its poorly written glory. I'm sure some people won't buy this, but I honestly didn't put this here for anyone else other than myself, so it's no skin off my back. Take what you want from this whole thing as you will. I'm just glad to get this off my chest one way or another, and grateful that I had an amazing friend that was able to help me out of my darkest places. And you know, at the end, he really outlined two very important things. There is always a light at the end of the tunnel. Your life can always get better. I mean, it looked very bleak for him at one point, trying to commit S-word himself and then trying to murder his stepmom. I mean, two horrible things that presented opportunities to him, but he got through it. He got through the bleak time. He got through the bad time. And if you're going through anything even similar or not even similar, but even no matter how bad it is, how depressed you are, how bad or horrible of a situation you are in, you can get out and there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And also, the second thing that he outlined was talking to somebody. He talked to his friend, and his friend saved his life because he would have been in prison for the rest of his life. And so, you know, that's two very important things that I just want to outline. Talk to somebody. If you're going through something, please talk to somebody. I've said it in multiple videos beforehand. If you have nobody to talk to, reach out at the email. My email in the description of this video or in my about section. But yeah, you should never resort to any of these extremes. And there is always another option. So if you're in a situation like this, just keep going. It will get better. And talk to somebody, because that can definitely, you know, make your situation a lot better and alleviate a lot of the stress on your shoulders. I've been diagnosed with a terminal disease. I haven't and don't want to tell my friends and family. Sup fam, longtime lurker. Don't know why I'm posting this. Maybe it's the alcohol. Maybe it's that I'm tired. You know, really tired. So here's my story. Some months back, I was hospitalized with pneumonia, and I spent a week in the ICU. My bloody lung had collapsed. Long story short, I'm in my 30s. Always been pretty fit. One of those annoying assholes that loves to get drunk and run marathons the next morning. But landed myself in the hospital, and after extensive tests, the docs found I had scar tissue on my lungs. My family and friends came to see me, but at the time, nothing really serious was discovered, you know, besides a deflated lung and pneumonia. I hate when people worry. so I tend to downplay anything serious. Now fast forward a few months. After lots of scans and tests, I've got pulmonary fibrosis. Basically, my lungs ain't so bueno. It's still in the early stages, so I don't have to be on oxygen yet. But this is it for me, kiddos. Never thought I'd go out because of my lungs. Always figured it'd be a heart attack or getting stabbed by a tweaker in an alley. What's funny is I'm not really mad about it. People talk about fighting disease. I've been in plenty of scraps. I've taken life. I've seen life taken. This isn't like that. Not at all. When it's your time, it just is. I feel like a fraud, a liar. I know people around me can tell things aren't okay, but I don't want to talk about it, you know? I've seen too many people die too slowly. What happens to people around them is agony. I've always been the strong one, but right now, I feel pathetically weak. I hate being dishonest. Everyone around me has so much shit going on, they don't need to deal with this too. So I'm telling you, my digital compatriots that gaze into this digital ether, I'm a coward, but that's okay. 10 years ago today, I almost executed a plan to murder my brother. I always considered myself the fuck up of the family. And this victim mentality really didn't do me any favors. My brother and I had kind of a rough start of it. Both parents underemployed, father alcoholic, mother depressed, and sort of checked out of reality. We were latchkey kids, basically raising ourselves. I kind of decided life was over before it began, but my brother was, like, I don't know if he was oblivious to the whole situation or if it fortified him, but he was just driven from day one. He was the younger brother, which made it even worse for me. While I was failing classes and getting teased and disappointing everyone, he was crushing it at everything he even gave a try. Phenomenal athlete, math whiz, everyone liked him, and somehow he actually managed to be a good person on top of all that. At the time, I thought everything came incredibly easy to him, so I didn't acknowledge any of the backbreaking hard work he had to put in to be that kind of guy. The resentment built up for the years, and eventually I became pretty alienated from my family. That's when I got into the party lifestyle, and from there gambling. It started as the group I'd fallen in with, always hitting casinos for cheap drinks and fast girls, but quickly became an obsession for me. They liked the games, I loved it, to the point that I lost the friends and just hung out at the casino all the time. Meanwhile, my brother was building this tremendous small business and making out really well for himself. Eventually, I hit bottom, or what I thought was bottom, after losing every last cent of borrowed money and having to leave town. I went to my brother, in earnest at the time, and begged him to just give me one more chance. He was so incredible. He got me into a program and helped me get clean. He got me a job at his business. He even let me live with him despite the fact that his fiance definitely hated my guts. But he didn't know about my gambling. I never told him. I stayed on the straight and narrow for a while, but after about a year, I just convinced myself that he wasn't doing any of these things, the job, the rehab, the room, out of kindness, but out of condescension. I grew to despise him and my whole life around him, even though it was exponentially happier and healthier than anything previous in my adult life, though I was too blind to see it. I felt beholden to him and figured that's what he wanted. At no time did it occur to me he wanted me to get on my own 2 feet and just be his brother. I figured if I was too cynical to do the same for him, why would he do it for me? I couldn't cope with the shame and remorse and anger oscillating inside. One moment I'd feel crippling rage. The next I'd be overwhelmed with guilt for being so ungrateful. Then I'd be angry at him for making me guilty. The thrill of hitting a big win was my only release. It made me feel successful and worthwhile and independent and gave me the sense of hope that nothing else at that point could. A lump sum of cash seemed like the answer to most of my problems, with the answer to the rest being a bigger lump sum. But it wasn't even really about the money so much at that point. I already had the best job I'd ever had before, It was the beautiful women, the free stuff, you know? You just feel like a movie star when you're on a run in a halfway decent casino. And you would only have to do the bare minimum to make me feel special in the moment because I felt so low in the rest of my life. After about a year and a half, I thought my brother might be getting suspicious because I was making good money at my job, but never seemed to buy anything fancy or make a move towards my own place. My presence was definitely causing strain on his marriage, and he was probably anxious to kick me out without forcing me back to my old lifestyle. So one day I told him I'd gotten an apartment and I took off. I was actually homeless. Some nights the casino would give me a room, but by that point I rarely had enough money to attract attention. I started borrowing from shadier and shadier people. My friends had learned their lesson about lending me anything of value, and most weren't even talking to me anymore. Or I cut contact with them in a rage when they refused to lend me money. In my eyes, at the time, they had so much, and there was no reason they couldn't kick me a few bucks. They were just greedy assholes. Yeah, I was a mess. But I always managed to pay back what I borrowed or get away from the lenders before anything too serious happened until I couldn't. An escort I was spending a fair deal of time with back then vouched for me to some friends of hers that I was good for a loan. I took out more than I usually would. I was sick of being homeless and convinced myself if I could just get enough capital to work with, I could get a nice place and sell my paintings for a living and have a nice, comfortable life. I was prepared to do whatever it took to make that night be the last night of living that way. And I kept telling myself next time was going to be it. Things would turn around. I was about to start winning again. It was statistics. I had to win the next one. I took more risks than I usually would and dipped into my emergency fund and put myself in a really bad position. I lost it all. It was more borrowed money than I'd ever lost, and I knew I was fucked. I was given a very clear ultimatum as to when I had to return the money. They knew way too much about me via the escort who recommended me for any hope of skipping out. Plus, unlike the smaller guys I dealt with before, mostly friends of friends, employers, or wannabes, these weren't the type of people to so easily forget a big loan. I spent the first couple of days calling in favors. I didn't really have any favors to call, so that didn't really help me. Only one guy even took my call, and that was just to tell me no, nicely. Then I started thinking I'd end things, but I was just such a narcissistic, bad person back then that within 12 hours of planning how I'd do it, I thought, this is really my brother's fault that I'm in this position. Why should I have to pay for what he did to me? He's been holding me down my whole life. I was so out of my mind back then that I don't know what the thought process leading up to that could have even been. But the only one of our parents we spoke to was dead, so I figured there must be something for me in the will. He didn't have any kids yet. We talked about the end of our life at some point, and he'd strongly hinted he'd leave something for me. Despite his success, he lived pretty frugally, so I couldn't just snatch his car or anything to handle this. I wasn't smart enough and didn't have enough time to embezzle. I figured I could make it seem like a robbery gone bad. I was nowhere near smart enough, even in a lucid state, to pull that off. I don't know what I was thinking. I made a spectacularly half-assed, nonsensical plan and was going to wait outside his house. He, or rather his fiancée, made me give back the key when I moved out and just go for it. My plan involved me showing up before he got home from work and did not take into account what I'd do if he were to come home early for whatever reason. So as I was approaching the house, he was out back doing some repairs and he recognized me. I don't know if my height and build are that distinct or he knew my shoes or what, because I was wearing a mask and he immediately came around and say, "Hey, is that you? Come on in here. I was just fixing to go out. Have you eaten yet?" I was still far enough away that I guess he didn't register that I was lurking around in the dark with a mask, but I ripped it off and something just overtook me. I was at the absolute peak of my stress levels and in a delirium. I just broke down. For maybe the first time in my life since he was a baby, I saw my brother in a wholly positive light and as a refuge rather than a threat. And I just collapsed crying. I told him my whole payment situation. He consoled me and took me inside and worked out an agreement in which he paid off the people in a question contingent on me entering treatment. He had no idea about my gambling problem before then. From then on, thanks to a lot of therapy and GA, I managed to heal from the whole clusterfuck that was the beginning of my life. My brother knows about everything now, the feelings of resentment, the lies, but not this. I've still never told anyone this. I almost talked about it in my last meeting, but I just can't bring myself to talk about it. I'm far too ashamed. And I'm always worried if I say it, even one place out loud, someone might know my brother and feel compelled to tell him. Even though I would never in my right mind, which I am now, consider doing something like that. My brother would have no reason to believe it. I almost told him on step 5 and again on step 9, but I figured it would fall under the cause injury to category. Basically means that it is something that would be more hurtful to tell him than to let him go on not knowing, because he's already had so much hurt and betrayal in his life. He genuinely trusts me now. He's happier for that, and it took years to get to that point. It might make me feel better to tell him, but it would probably be just one more burden for him to carry. I almost told him today, thinking enough time had passed. It had to be all right, but I thought about it and realized, he stands to gain nothing. It would really be so much more for me than for him. I love him so much, and I'll never forgive myself for spitting in the face of his kindness for so many years. I could never tell him. But at the same time, it definitely creates a wedge between us. I've thought about it more than once. I couldn't ever take the risk. He's the best thing I'll ever have. I've just got to put that all behind me. I think this helped me think through it though. I don't know. Thanks for reading if you did get this far. Oh, and if you need help, do try a meeting. My brother dragging me into one surely saved my life. I'll drop a list of national hotlines in the comments. My rich dad lost it all. So I'm 24 female. I come from a very privileged place, and I can't really talk about that with my friends because I'm not really sure there will be any left after that, so I'm saying that here. My dad made his money because he was in tech when no one was. Like, he started working in the 90s and got involved in the creation of so many major companies, it's actually insane. He made millions from it. And today, he's now about to be homeless. So how did he do such a magic trick, you may ask? Addiction is not your friend. I'm pretty sure my dad has them all. Alcohol, gambling, drugs. When I was little, it was pretty well known that we had money. And I mean, pretty easy to see. I had an amazing apartment with a beautiful view, a castle for the weekend, and various summer houses. We were always traveling to exclusive places. I had my first Chanel bag when I was 9, my first Rolex at 12. But behind the scenes, everything was bad. My mom left my dad when I was 4 because he was beating us when he was drunk. And from that moment on, well, he wasted everything. It started to be well known in his line of work that he wasn't reliable for partying too much, not showing to some important meetings, etc. For that, people got less inclined to work with him, and rightfully so. But even with that, he was settled for life in theory. For some strange reason, he stopped paying his taxes. Like, I don't know, he just didn't feel like it anymore. Well, that's what got him in the end. Also the crazy gambling, but a casino can't seize you, the state can. So little by little, everything got sold, and now they came for where we lived, and we lost that too. In a month, he'll be in the streets without a job. I've still got 1 year left of uni that don't really know how I'm going to pay for. A trust fund isn't a thing in my country, and I don't really have anything to my name, but I'm about to be a doctor, so I'm not too worried for me. My dad, on the other end, I don't know what's going to happen. Honestly, it just is hard to comprehend how you can go from having it all to nothing. Piece of advice: don't drink and pay your taxes. And I mean, wow, that's just such a depressing story, and who knows what happened to the OP's father, because I don't know how you can deal with the weight of knowing you had it all and you're homeless now. Like, what do you even do at that point? truly, like, that is like just rock. I don't know how you even recovered from that. So I hope OP's father is doing the best he can. But I mean, this is a great lesson. Once again, I mean, we've covered multiple confessions in today's video about addiction. And this just goes to show that nobody is, invincible to addiction. Addiction can tear anybody down. Whether you have millions or whether you have $5 in your pocket, addiction can ruin your life. You can have it all and it can go to nothing. So just everyone watching, just take this as a lesson and a moral of a story. Addiction is a slippery slope. And even if you have millions of dollars to protect yourself, it still may never be enough. So just, please be responsible, everyone watching, with drinking, drugs, gambling, etc., or just don't do it. Because basically the only thing that can stem from it is bad. But yeah, just a great moral of the story. And with that last one, that wraps up some terrifying Reddit confession threads. What were your guys' thoughts on this video? This video was very heavy, very depressing, very sad, and I think a lot of lessons to be learned here. I really do think that these confessions and stories can teach you a lot. It's taught me a lot just reading through people's experiences on what I should and shouldn't do throughout my life, and it's really impacted me. So hopefully some of these confessions impacted you as well, and I just want to say thank you so much for watching. It means the world. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out some other videos on the channel. I'm sure you'll enjoy those, and I just want to say I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much for watching. It means the world. And yeah, this was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to Reddit Horror Stories. This video will include tons of spooky and scary true Reddit stories of scary encounters or experiences people have had. And I'll keep the intro short because I'm really excited to dive into these interesting stories. So make sure you stick around and listen to all of them because they are definitely worth the listen. And also, before we get into it, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. It helps a lot and I appreciate it a ton. But all right, without further ado, welcome to Reddit Horror Stories. How my friend and I were stalked for years and nearly kidnapped. First part of the story got deleted, so I'm gonna shorten it. Basically, a summer camp me and my friend started to attend in 2019 does surveys every summer based on the topic we'll be discussing, so we get better public speaking and a more generalized opinion from others in the area. Me and my friend teamed up with 2 counselors and hit the town. Our last stop was a Walmart and we talked to a bunch of different people. The most memorable was the second to last, an older man that asked for our names and all about us after he finished answering our questions. At the time, we were both 13 with hardly any concept of stranger danger, so we gladly answered about ourselves. Anyway, a few days later, an account popped up on our friend request called ed_Patisse. The account linked was a bunch of old posts, commented a Pacino of fire and rose emojis, and called us hot and sexy on our posts. It got to the point where they started to send blank pics, so me and my friend ended up blocking the account. Only a few days later, the account was permanently deleted. It didn't show up in our searches for it. That's why we thought it was the end of it. It was not. When we finally got back to school in August, we basically forgot the event altogether. Yet, again, this time on both of our Facebook accounts, we got a notice from someone named ed_Patisse wanting to be our friend. Immediately blocked that account again, but not before they had already commented lewd things on my baby pictures. Commented on how pretty my baby blonde hair was, how I looked good in short dresses, etc. After that, we both talked to our parents about the situation, and other than keeping our accounts private, there wasn't much else we could really do. The cops shrugged and said just to take the app down completely, but hey, we're teens. Of course we didn't do that. Over the years, till around the end of 2021, this man kept sending friend requests from different accounts with similar variations of their names, which was a bit stupid, but whatever. Though, at the beginning of 2022, this is where it starts to get really creepy. Accounts with the names and pictures of our friends started showing up in our notifications, so obviously we added them thinking it was our friends. We were wrong. Almost immediately, most of our posts had likes or comments on them from this account, and there were multiple DMs of blank pics from both of us. We blocked the account again. This became a reoccurring cycle. An account with friends' info, pictures, and mutual friends would get hacked, stolen, duplicated, etc., just so they could friend us again and again without us worrying too much about it. Finally, it got to the point we stopped adding people from our school at all, even friends. The final time this happened was the summer of 2022. The swarm of fake accounts had stopped roughly 2 months prior, and seeing as this friend request looked legit by a school friend, I decided to try it out. My friend didn't, she was still very wary, but I decided to give it a shot. The compromise was to fully delete our socials and get new ones if this account turned out the same. I was definitely a stupid 17-year-old, but try not to judge me too harshly. But this account didn't spam our pictures, didn't DM us blank pics, just interacted with us like any normal school kid would. A like here and there on a new post, a like on a story posted, never commented on posts. So finally we thought it was over. Haha, wrong. Strange things started to happen and became more of an intentional thing than a coincidence. I would post a picture of me and a friend at the park. A couple minutes later, a white truck pulled up in the lot, eerily close to my car, driver's side door, but we tried not to think too much of it. There were still a few spaces over. Me and my friend were in the swings, basically straight line of sight of the parking lot. The truck lights remained on, pointing at us for a long time. It got to the point that me and my friend finally started getting worried and anxious, so we hopped up from the swings and decided to take laps around the park instead. The car was far too close to mine for us to be comfortable chancing getting into it in time. Mind you, it was 10 p.m. at night, so we were the only ones there. We waited and roamed the park for nearly an hour before the truck finally drove away. That's when we raced to my car and I drove home, looking behind me frequently just in case. This happened in early June, and it kept happening. I didn't really notice it, thought it was a one-off occurrence. It never dawned in my head that it happened after I posted pictures of said where I was with friends. But I started to see a white truck just about anywhere I posted about. Even one that would wait outside my high school when I posted a story about my walk to my mom's store only a mile from our school. Again, young and dumb, I didn't think the worst of it. I thought it was a parent waiting for a kid, plus there was a bunch of people that owned all kinds of variations of white trucks in my town, so I never put much worrying into seeing them all the time. My friend never mentioned any white truck, and if we were together, we rarely saw any of them. But I started to get nervous of them after one time I was walking to my mom's store. I decided to take a glance at the driver of the truck that sat near the car line every day after school. It was the same, if not a bit older, man from our Walmart survey trip of 2019. It was bizarre, definitely. We were never expecting to see him again, especially since we met him in a few towns over from our town. Yet, lo and behold, he was right there. That's when I walked, probably ran actually, to my mom's store. This kept happening, and I finally knew I was being stalked after seeing him that first time because I saw him everywhere on foot. Anyway, this post is getting long, so it'll fast forward to the last bit that happened on the last day of our shared summer camp in late July 2023. At this point, I was still 17, and since I was older than most of my new campers, I might as well have been considered a staff member. I drove kids to camp and home every night, and they paid me for the gas money, so I was cool with doing it. Didn't bother me since they were in the same town as me, and there was others farther away from the counselors typically drove me home. This day, I posted all the last day campfire pictures right before I left so I could try and save my phone that was suffering from glitches, lack of data, and didn't let me communicate or call others because my storage was too full. So I photo dumped a bunch of stuff, but it didn't fix the problem. My phone was essentially broken. It hardly worked, and I bought my current phone after this occurrence. On top of this, one of the older campers that visited us on the last day, who was 19 and a male, didn't have a phone either, but he also was in the car with me, in the back seat. I had 3 campers. One didn't have a phone either, and the other 2 were dead. One was charging theirs with my cardboard, but we didn't think much of it. Just turned on the radio full blast and gunned it back home. As I pulled off the back road of our camp up to the intersection, the light turned green and we went forwards. In the lane next to us was a white truck that kept turning his brights on and off. It was a bit weird, so I sped up, but I didn't think much of it. Side note, my best friend, let's call her Anne for this, has a baby. Anne had her kid at 16, so at this point her kid was nearly a year old. Still very fussy in car rides and such. This becomes important later because Anne was there for the last day of camp too. She left right before we did when her baby became cranky. Eventually, I didn't see the white truck behind me anymore, so I slowed down a bit. It was nearly 9:30 at this point, late enough for the highway between our towns to be essentially empty. I have this back road that is a bit curvy that leads close to my house and directly to a rich neighborhood. It's the streets I typically take to get back to my house from camp if I had no one to take home, and everyone that was regular in my car called it a detour. It was quite pretty, with a bunch of full evergreen trees and wildlife. The kids, not really kids, but they acted like it, who was 13F, 15M, and 15M in the back were begging me to go on the detour since it was the last day of camp. So I caved in and hit on my blinker, turning right onto the back road. Now listen, I'm not the safest person out there, don't judge me. I'm still basically a kid too. But all the ones in the back loved to hang out the windows on the back road, so I let them stick their heads out of the sunroof, sit on the windowsill while holding the bars on top of my car. I went slow, under 10 miles an hour, just so they could do it and not worry about them getting hurt. I mean, there was no one on the back roads. Cops never camped out on these streets, and I was going under the speed limit by like 20, so there wasn't any harm in letting them stick out the windows. Eventually, I let them bully me into taking them around the rich neighborhoods that had cool water fountains and covered bridges on the streets. Apparently, one of the covered bridges caved in, so we had to go around on this super narrow street right next to the large drainage ditch at least 15 to 20 feet deep. As we were going around it, a car comes up behind us. I assumed it was one of the people who lived in the neighborhood, so I was going to speed up to let them get to their house. Finally, we came to the four-way of the rich people's street. Straight forward was a dead end, which is what I originally was going to do. To the left was a broken covered bridge, and to the right was a back roundabout that would take us back to the beginning of the street. But it had no houses or lights back there because the neighborhood is still being built. But let's call him Jake. 19M told me to go right. Mind you, one of the campers was sticking their body out of my skylight from the back seat, so I couldn't see out of my rearview mirror. I didn't really want to, but I trusted his instincts and turned right. As soon as I did, I started to hear honking behind me. I was a bit startled, and so were the kids in the back seat. I glanced out in my side view mirrors, but I can't see anything past bright LED lights. I thought it was because I took too long, so I sped up a bit after I turned right. There was a honk at the end of the hill on this back street, and it makes you tug the steering wheel pretty hard to stay on the road, especially in the dark. The car behind me turned right too. They started flashing their LED brights, honking loudly, and I rolled down windows screaming at us. They kept trying to get in the lane next to us and bump into my car to run us off the road. That is when I knew this was serious. Instantly, I started screaming at the kids in the backseat to sit down, buckle up, and roll up their windows. They barely managed to do that by the time I hit the bend at the end of the hill really hard and gunned it off the street. Driving around the drainage ditch with little problem. I've done it multiple times. There was no phone in the car to call anyone, least of all the police, so I just ended up speeding down the back streets as the car chased me, trying to run me off the road multiple times. When we came upon sharp corners, they slowed down. That told me he didn't know the area well, which I used to my advantage. As I was approaching a stop sign for me to go left or right, my house was to the right, so left it was. I yelled at Jake to check my right because I'm not stopping for the sign. I sped past it. The car, this is about the time I noticed it was a fucking white truck, tried to hit my bumper again, and I swerved into someone's yard. Grass was damaged the next day when I drove past it. I booked it down the street, hitting every turn as fast as possible, and eventually I thought I lost the truck. I sped past my high school and onto the highway again, where we got off in the first place. I didn't see the truck behind us, and we were all still freaked out. I took a right to go onto another main way and passed by a closed gas station on the way, very important in the moment. I stopped at a gas station and handed the kids in my back some cash for them to go inside to get a drink and snack to help them calm down. None of them were crying, thank God, the adrenaline junkies they are. They thought it was more exciting than anything. I told Jake to go watch them in the store and make sure they didn't do anything stupid while I filled up my gas tank. We waited at the gas station for about 20 minutes before I went back onto the main road to take them home just in case. I asked them if they had saw the car at all while they were hanging out the windows, and only one of them said they thought they did, but the truck's lights were off. It was the same truck from a town or so over, from the intersection in front of the back road of our camp. They followed us for nearly 25 minutes. After I dropped all of them off, I was a bit still shaky and decided to try and see if my phone would call someone that I could talk about what happened. The only contact that would load was Anne, since she was the last person I talked to on our phones. With a stroke of luck, my phone actually let me call. She picked up, but all I could hear from her side of the line was her crying. Obviously panicked, I asked her what was wrong. And lo and behold, she shares a story eerily similar to what just happened to me. Apparently, Anne's baby started crying so loud she could barely focus on the road, so she pulled into the closed gas station I mentioned earlier, right outside our high school I sped past. She was giving her kid their bottle when a white truck pulled into the lot. Immediately she was wary because it was closed, and she was right. Less than 30 seconds later, this truck parked horizontally in front of Anne's car to block her in. She immediately started the car again, locked her doors, and pulled off over the grass curb, blocking her from the street. She was not chancing her baby at all. Anne told me the only thing she remembered was a man that we had saw years ago in the Walmart. His eyes staring at her like she was just a piece of meat for him to have. As she raced home, the truck caught up to her. She turned on her back road, running out of gas, and the truck started to flash its lights, honk, run her off the road the entire time. But a couple streets before hers, a little red car pulled out in front of her and started to brake check her as the white truck tried to hit her from behind. It was a mess. She took a chance, sped up, and swung onto her street to at least lose the red car. The truck booked it after her. Apparently, both of her older brothers were waiting outside for her with some of her friends to help her bring in the stuff for the baby. Upon seeing this, as she pulled into her driveway, the white truck sped off. If her brothers weren't outside, that would have been a different story. But anyway, long story short, that truck that follows me all the way back had an accomplice in a red car that followed my friend Anne. When they couldn't catch me, they went for her. Both me and Jake suspected that because I didn't go onto the dead end where the man could have cut me off. That's probably why it suddenly got violent so quickly. If you want more of my story times that sound a bit crazy but sadly true, comment below. Edit. I never mentioned what happened after this, but the man in the white truck and the other in the little red car were found a town over when there was footage taken of them attempting to kidnap a 7-year-old off a porch and being attacked by their dog. Along with this, we found out there had been several sightings of a white truck around our town following others doing similar things days after it first happened to us. Following cars that had a similar description to my friend's and I's car. Our reports were officially filed after we saw the information of the car on Facebook, along with the identity of the man that had stalked us for years. It took years to get rid of them, but we now don't have to worry about the men anymore. I think I met a serial killer. I dated a guy whose father was a short-tempered and isolated man, also a truck driver and skilled hunter. He would come into the room with all of us laughing and say how much he wanted to strangle us and carve our eyeballs out. And everyone would laugh and say, "Oh, Dad." Once for Thanksgiving, I was in the basement and he came down. He didn't know I was down there, talking to himself about how to perfect the glaze, lay it on thick, how nobody would suspect it. That day, he wouldn't let anyone else cook, didn't eat any of the food himself, and everyone in the house had diarrhea, stomach pains, and vomiting. Before I'd left for good, his dad took a truck driving job to be trained in Ohio. We were in Illinois. Nobody heard from him for 2 weeks, but he called crying from Washington State, saying he lost his wallet and ID and needed help home and missed his family so much. Nobody asked any questions at all. They got him back. It stuck in the back of my mind how he had started Uber driving that New Year's in the city, and there were a few stories of women that had gone missing around that time who were never seen again after getting into an Uber. Maintenance man tries to get into my hotel at 11 o'clock at night. Last night, my wife, 1-year-old daughter, and I were staying at the Element in Orlando on I Drive, and at around 11 p.m. we hear someone open our door and try to come in. For the layout to understand a little better, at the end of the hallway leading to our room, there's another door that is before a set of 5 rooms, so we are staying in one of those rooms. You needed a key to get into that door as well. I hear that door open, and immediately that's when someone tried to come into our home. Fortunately, I had this secondary lock on that would stop the door unless you unlocked it from the inside. I have my gun and look through the peephole and ask, "Can I help you?" He responds with, "Maintenance." I then say, "No thank you," and he rushes away quickly and leaves, testing no other doors. I know this because a minute later I opened my door and the secondary door and he was completely gone. He was wearing the company uniform except he had on black gloves and had nothing in his hands or nearby to perform this quote-unquote maintenance. At this point, my wife is freaked out and calls the front desk, who seem very caught off guard, and say that they test all the doors to make sure the key battery is not low. Which I understand, but what I can't understand is them testing at 11 at night and only testing my door and no one else's. That seems like something you would do before someone checks in or after they check out. We then call the cops, and the manager is at the door with the one cop who comes out, and she states that they have to test the doors before maintenance leaves at 10. So now I'm wondering why this guy didn't clock out an hour ago. At this point, the cop steps in the room and shuts the door to talk to us privately and sends the manager back down and says he will speak to her if he needs her. When he's in the room, he asks what happened, and I let him know the situation, and he agrees with us that it's very strange and something that doesn't sound right about this. But at this time, there's nothing he can do except give us his advice. His advice was to make sure to not let this go and to call corporate. He did also say that the front desk woman was giving him different times every time he would ask about her when the maintenance men clocked out and did this lock check. He did ask us how much longer we had at our stay. We are leaving here in the morning, which he said was good. Is there a possibility there's something going on here in the hotel that the night shift is all in on? Is this just an over-exaggeration and I'm just being a Karen? Also, as a side note, in the morning, my wife did go down and have breakfast with herself and my daughter, and I wasn't there with them until they were about to finish up. Could someone have thought she was staying here alone? When you go into the room, if you don't look into the closet or have my one backpack, all you could see is just my wife and daughter's stuff all out in the room. If you came in to make the bed, which they did. I'd love to know what anyone else thinks about this and what I should do, if anything. Truck stops are either haunted or portals to hell. I worked in the truck stop industry for about 15 years. All of the following stories took place at the same location. I worked there less than 18 months. If people are interested, I have other stories at other locations, but this one had the most frequent occurrence of weird stuff that happened. I was given the opportunity to help open this brand new location, and since it came with a fat raise and a promotion, I definitely accepted. And now it's been about 5 years since the location opened. I don't believe there's a single employee left that was there when we opened of the over 60 employees we hired prior to opening day. On opening day, not long after the ribbon cutting ceremony, a woman delivering flowers dropped the flowers on her sandaled foot and sliced her foot open, bleeding all over the entrance. Within a week of being open, we had water and sewage coming up through all the drains, including sewage ones outside all over the property. It had not been raining. It wasn't like a flood situation. Weather-wise, we had no idea what caused it to happen so suddenly. And just as quickly as it happened, it went away. Plumbers were baffled. A couple of months after we opened, we faced a severe storm that destroyed the high-rise interstate sign and caused a 7-hour power outage. I had sent several people home, but I had kept a couple employees in case the power came back. As we sat in the restaurant dining room chatting under electric lantern light, an employee who was a local resident and had lived in the town all her life mentioned that people were a little worried when this place was announced to be built because this property had been rumored to have been a Native American burial ground for years. I have zero way to prove or disprove if this is accurate, but given the events getting more serious as time went on, it makes you wonder. When the power did come back, despite several steps, I took lick unplugging all the equipment to make sure the surge wouldn't fry stuff. We lost several pieces of expensive equipment. Some of this equipment was critical and caused major operational problems for weeks until it could be replaced. The first winter after we opened was the coldest in years. So cold that we had to buy space heaters for the servers in the electrical room so the servers wouldn't freeze. We had issues with frozen pipes, especially in the truck care center and the restaurant. 6 months after opening was the first death. A truck driver came in to take a shower in one of the shower rooms, and we had sensors on the doors that let us know how long someone has been in there. If the timer had been going for a couple hours, we would knock on the doors to see if maybe they had actually left so we could clean it for the next driver. The employee knocked on the door of the shower that had been in use for a couple hours, and there wasn't an answer. She used the key to open the door, and the driver was on the floor. He had died of a stroke. He'd been driving a semi-truck 30 minutes before he had entered that room. The employee who had opened the door was significantly traumatized. The company did a great job of offering support for her, but she didn't last much longer after that. A few weeks later was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. I was working on the restaurant side of the truck stop as the restaurant manager had quit after a series of bad things that happened to her, and they asked me to move into that role temporarily. The assistant manager on the store side came over because the freakiest thing had just happened. She pulls me into the store side office and pulls up the cameras to show me what happened. A small, 4-door sedan pulls into the lot but doesn't pull into the gas station side, pulls into the truck stop side where the semi-trucks pull in. He parks next to the maintenance shed, which is located adjacent to the main building and very close to the large trash compactor. He gets out of the vehicle, opens one of the doors and pulls out a large trash bag. He throws the trash bag on top of the compactor. He then gets in his car and leaves the property. I don't remember exactly how long, as she had fast forwarded the footage, but I think it was an hour or two later he returned. He pulls back next to the compactor, climbs on top of the compactor, and chucks the bag onto the roof of the maintenance shed. He then climbs down off the compactor, gets in his car, and leaves never to return. This is when we noticed by an employee who had been outside gathering trash to take onto the compactor. The maintenance shed is more of a small building / garage. It's about 20 by 20 feet. If the employee had not seen him throw it up there, it probably wouldn't have been noticed maybe ever, as the building was as high as a 1-story building. Once the employee saw the individual leave, he goes up onto the shed, gets a ladder, and goes to get the bag on top of the roof of the shed. He brought the bag inside the store to show the assistant manager. Inside the bag is a ton of paper. These documents list hundreds or thousands of addresses across the United States. Under each address is specific hidden location on each property where a body could be found. No information on who the individuals were, just sex and location of the individual or individuals on these properties. The location spanned from coast to coast, but I didn't get a chance to look deeply into them. I was really freaked out and thought that touching them would contaminate something. So we just put what we had and pulled it back into the bag. The obvious answer here was to call the police, so that is what happened next. Now the thing about truck stops is that they are more often than not in remote locations along interstates for obvious reasons. The town this truck stop is located in has 3 police officers total. It is a town with less than 1,000 people, so when I say the chief of police showed up, it's because he was the highest ranking officer of 3 in the town. He hated us as truck stops bring crime, and suddenly he had a lot more work to do. He comes in, watches the footage, and looks in the bag. And the most frustrating thing here is that was not concerned in the slightest. He asked what we wanted him to do about it. It was probably a prank, etc. He took the items with him, filled out a form for request for the footage, and left. My hope here is that he at least forwarded this to the FBI. A couple of weeks after this, there was a body found of a bound, nude, and recently deceased man across the street at a dump. Because it was a dump, they had no idea where the individuals had originated from. Sometime in following weeks, there was a second death on the property. It was a driver that had died in his truck. Somewhere in the middle of this, we had another severe storm, and the interstate high-rise was destroyed again. We had another weird incident involving abandoned things, but this one had a resolution. A driver came in to show us that someone had left ratchet straps and small children clothing folded up neatly next to a diesel pump. The combination of the items was alarming to me, so I got on the camera system and called the police. I was able to find the truck that left the items, and luckily, I got the one amazing police officer in the town. This time, she actually did her job and followed up with me to let me know what she had found the driver and called him. He had his kid in the truck for a while for summer break, but it had ended, so he had brought her home with her mom and wasn't going to see his kid for a while, so when he was cleaning up his truck, he had his clothing and some straps he didn't need and thought someone else could use the items. He didn't think about the combination of the two, raising eyebrows, and he honestly was very grateful that somebody would be worried and follow up in case. A couple months after the first year mark, the state DOT had to shut down the off and on ramp to the interstate exit because it started to collapse. And they were worried that the overpass would collapse as well. We had nearly zero business for weeks as construction crews rebuilt the ramps and repaired the overpass. It was during this time that I earned a promotion to a general manager role and was moved to a different location. I kept in touch for a while, especially with my former boss and the assistant manager. The incidences continued. Couple of months after I left, there was 2 major incidents, but I cannot remember which came first. One was involving an individual that entered the building with a machete. He was aggressive. The employees were terrified. I wish I hadn't deleted it, but there is a footage of state troopers coming in with AKs and drop-kicking the guy, unsure where this person came from as he walked. And this location was 10 to 15 miles from the nearest town. The second was a customer attacked a teenage cashier because he didn't get the customer's lotto ticket correct and got into a brawl with the maintenance guy who came to the kid's defense. Slowly over time I lost touch with them and they both left the location, so I stopped getting the stories. I don't know if they are continuing. Haunted? Portal to hell? I don't know. But what I do know is now I avoid truck stops like the plague. Alone at the campsite. In the summer of 2022, I was desperate and frustrated. I had quit my job a few months prior in the pursuit of my own startup, and my business wasn't exactly thriving. After 6 years of IVF treatment, my wife had blessed me with a daughter early that year. And while I was elated to be a father, the stress of being a dad, the financial pressures from the clinic, and the weight of being the sole provider for my family had taken a significant toll in the recent months. As summer approached, I decided I needed a weekend away to clear my head and get back into the grind. I decided to take a 2-night trip, just me and our dogs, to a lake off an old logging road about 3 hours from home. It was one of my favorite spots and I knew the woods there quite well. I packed my things, leashed the dogs, 2 blue heelers, and set out early one Tuesday morning. When I got to the trailhead, the parking lot was empty. Middle of the week, I was stoked to be alone. There was a single deer path up to a canyon about 1,200 feet, over 5 miles to get to the lake, and neither myself nor the dogs met anyone else on the trail that entire way up the mountain. I got to the lake around midday, spent the afternoon fishing and collecting wood and water for the coming night. The lake was pristine and quiet, not a soul in sight. I was truly alone aside from the dogs. I found a flat spot on the east side of the lake where the vegetation cleared and I could set up a tent, and I made a small camp about 30 yards from the trail. I would have preferred to go further up the mountain, but it was still early in the season, and when I got to my campsite, the rest of the trail was too snow-packed to continue farther. As it was, I had to navigate over several hard-packed embankments before I got to a suitable area. The icy slush was difficult to navigate, even for the dogs, and when we had finally crushed our way over and through a few hundred yards, I made the decision we would be going no further. I set up my tent, hung my pack on a limb, and took my fishing pole back the direction I'd come. I spent the evening catching and cooking fish at the edge of the spillway, and as the sun began to set, the dogs and I made our way back to the tent. Slipping over wet stumps and clumsily pushing through the snow, I stumbled into camp exhausted and ready for a fire. As I approached the site, though, I realized some things were out of place. My pack, which had been hung on a limb, was sitting neatly on the other side of the clearing about 20 feet from where I'd left it. Sitting on top of it was a large eagle feather. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The dogs began a low growl, but as they circled the site, there was no one there. As I approached my tent, a stick had been used to carve an inscription into the dirt outside the entrance. It was two U's, one upside down, connected to the other by a thin line, and then further connected by another line to a larger U shape. I would describe it as a Native American petroglyph in the shape of a bird or an eagle. Uniform, symmetrical, and above all things, fresh. Someone had been there. Someone neither I nor two very distrusting dogs had seen, heard, or smelled. Someone who had left no footprints through the snow and mud. Someone who had not passed us on the trail, or whose cars had been parked at the trailhead. My stomach dropped. I felt a presence of being watched, but I couldn't tell from where. I quickly built a huge campfire, and with dread watched as the last of the sunlight sank beneath the ridge. That night was a fever dream. Pulling the dogs into the tent with me, I clung to my knife and flashlight, praying that whatever was watching me would leave. It didn't. Throughout the night, I would periodically awaken to a variety of sounds. Yells, shrieks, the snapping of branches. The dogs would sit up, growl and bark until I'd open the screen of the tent and shine my light into the forest. At one point, I had just drifted off to sleep when the dog's low growl woke me up. Thinking I might have to drop on whatever this was, I slowly unzipped the tent and leaned out with my flashlight. Taking a breath, I clicked it on. Standing just 3 feet from me was her doe and a calf. I scanned across her. An entire herd was in the sight. As my dogs lost it, the deer spooked and sprinted back into the forest, a crushing and trampling noise as several dozen deer evacuated the area. As I faded, I heard laughter. The deep laughter of a man turned to crying as it escalated, then sobbing, and then to deep growling. Much more boisterous than anything my dogs could make, or even a bear would produce. I held the dogs tightly. Sleep eluded me for the rest of the night, and as soon as the sun peeked into the valley, I packed my things and left. I've never been so terrified in my life. Has anyone ever experienced something similar? It's been 2 years and I can't make sense of it. I need answers. I was hiding from your mom. My mom is dead. One of the creepiest stories I know personally is from my best friend when he came home at his house babysitting a friend's kid. The kid, whose name was Junior, was roughly 4 to 5, I want to say. His dad was a courier, so would often be doing deliveries late at night. David, my best friend, was a teen by this point, so being home without an adult was no great task. It's important to mention that his father was a pretty paranoid individual who bought into a lot of fear-mongering in the world, so he had a camera set up all over the place. I want to say this happened in 2014. Anyways, David was busy in his bedroom and was minding his own business. But then we decided to head into his den, where all the cameras happened to be set up. But the den was locked. David knocked on the door to the den, and Junior opened it up. "Why do you lock the door?" David said. "Because of the lady," Junior said. "What lady?" David asked. "Your mom. I saw her in the kitchen." The house's living room was directly connected to the kitchen, and if you were standing in the kitchen entryway, you could see the door leading outside. It was one of those screened-in sitting areas. Junior claimed that David's mother was right there in the doorway. Really strange, especially considering David's mother had passed away just about 8 months prior. David was chilled by the remark, but the skeptic in him knew it was likely just Junior's overly active imagination, so he agreed to go and check with him. He brought a kitchen knife. If I'm remembering the story correctly, he walked with Junior down the hallway into the kitchen, where the door was open. The door being open was pretty normal. It was a hot summer day, and the house trapped a lot of heat. David stepped out onto the screen sitting area and looked left down the ramp his mother used to get to use outside. Nothing. He looked to the right, seeing the length of the yard. Nothing. Junior was incessant that there was someone there, which is strange considering usually in situations like these, kids tend to feel better after you poke around for them. David couldn't calm him down. Junior was certain. He kept saying, "I saw your mom. She was there." So David bargained with him. Everything's recorded on the camera, so we'll just look on them, and we'll know for certain whether someone is there or not. So they sifted through the cameras, and David looked for another timestamp around when Junior claimed that his deceased mother had shown up. He stared down all the cameras as the timer ticked on, and nothing showed up. But suddenly, he watched as the camera showed a figure enter his backyard from the front by pulling the latch. An old woman, at least in her mid-60s, confidently walked into her backyard. She had a cloth grocery bag in her hand. She headed up the ramp and stood in their screened sitting area for a few moments. She then reached for the door of the kitchen, cracking it open, then brazenly stepped inside. After some time, Junior saw her in the kitchen and headed to David to tell him. Based on the camera's timestamps, she stood in the kitchen for at least 10 minutes. The absolutely insane part is, she left as David went to investigate with Junior. The camera footage showed him walking around and her leaving as he looked around. When he looked left down the ramp where she'd come up, she'd already wrapped around and actually took the long way around through the length of the yard. When he looked right, he quite literally just missed her. It was generally a matter of maybe half a second. Someone wandered right into his backyard and right into his kitchen, then stood there for 10 minutes in his kitchen doing God knows what. Nothing was stolen, nobody was harmed or anything. Well, anyway, the night went on and nothing came of it. Me personally, I would have phoned the police, but David wouldn't. I think there's a chance that his dad may have had some guns that were acquired through perhaps some non-reputable methods. They were locked away from everyone. Whatever small comfort that is, haha. So David's instinct was that his dad would likely be furious about the police being called. Well, anyway, some time passed. Days, weeks, who knows. I'm not even sure how this information came about, but somehow David was told by either a family member or a staff member that the old woman that wandered into the house had dementia and had an episode and just sort of found herself there by a string of coincidences. People are scarier than anything paranormal. This is a true story of something I experienced. It must have been over a decade by now. I was a kid at the time. My dad had bought this quaint house on the outskirts of a little town. It was a decently sized home with a big backyard overlooking the marshes and unused farmers' fields. And the only entrance to it was either through the house or across the large fields. To put into context how this fits into the story was because my bedroom at the time of living with my dad was situated on the back of the house, facing the big backyard. I remember one night very vividly, some 10 to 12 years later, I was sitting in my room doing digital artwork on my computer. It was something I loved to do as a teenager, and I'd listen to music with headphones on. The way I was sitting had me facing semi away from the big window in my room, the largest in the house. I had my blackout blinds drawn. It was the only room in the entire house that had the light on, and I'd assume from outside you'd see slivers of light through the edges of the folding blinds. I think it was between 2:30 to 3 a.m. I was peacefully minding my own business when I hear a massive slam on my window. It was dull but a loud thud, and what I thought was a shout. My dad was sleeping peacefully in the room next to me. How I didn't hear anything at the time so amazes me to this day. I remember just sitting there, shook, no clue what I just heard, until it happened again. I heard it clear. Somebody was outside my window, in the backyard. Whoever this was had no reason to be there. I remember being too scared to open my blinds. Instead, I got up, just staring at the window, not taking my eyes off it. Something I'm thankful for this day was I went with my gut feeling. My gut feeling was telling me to grab a flashlight and check the front door. This was an old house, so I would have to leave the comfort of the house to enter the barn to get to the main entrance of the house. I remember shining my light through the glass in the window. The window had been frosted film for privacy, but sure enough, I barely got the flashlight lifted 3 to 4 inches of the glass before seeing the coat of whoever was out there. The real kicker? Absolute terror set in when I realized the door hadn't been locked the entire time. I managed to lock it and run inside, and the first thing I grabbed was a bread knife. Not practical, but when your adrenaline and fear is coursing through your brain, it's the last thing you think of. I remember trying to wake up my dad, who passed out like a drunk sailor, to see whoever was outside. We never found the man, and he never came back. Had I not locked that door, prank or not, I dread to think what could have happened to me. I've seen some shit in my life, but people will forever scare me. Deep Sea Expedition Encounter. This story is not mine, but my uncle's. Please excuse any formatting issues, I'm on mobile. I've been wanting to post this story for some time, but haven't found the best r/. If another place is better applicable for the story, please let me know. I'll clarify that what I believe the story to be true, there's a lot of room for speculation. I'll start out with some background information. My uncle has been a marine biologist for the past 50 years. He is now in his 60s and has spent the last 25 years teaching marine biology at a university. His area of expertise has been the North and Mid-Atlantic Ocean. Growing up, every time he would visit him in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, he would tell us countless stories of the numerous deep-sea expeditions he participated in. Prior to his teaching years, he was primarily a researcher. Every single story was interesting and filled with wonder. The story I'm about to tell is the only one that has me questioning what is really out there in the deep ocean. For the sake of this story, I'll refer to my uncle as Uncle Jay, or just Jay to keep some semblance of anonymity. This story begins when Uncle Jay was getting ready to embark on an upcoming expedition to the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. The research vessel they would be traveling on was a medium-sized vessel about 80 meters long. One of those ships that has a crane, and it was crewed by maybe 20 men, and there was about 15 marine biologists of various specialties attending. It was early summertime in the 90s. I'm unsure on the exact date, and Uncle Jay was about 30 at the time. He said they could have had a better day for loading the vessel. The ocean was calm and the weather was beautiful. They would be out at sea for the next month and a half, all weather forecasts looking promising. Once the ship was loaded, they embarked on their journey. It took them approximately a week to reach the ridge. The primary goal of this expedition was examine and possibly identify new species of sea life in that region. Additionally, they wanted to examine how known species lived. They didn't have any submarines, so in order to find any new species, they had an intriguing plan. Using the crane on board the ship, they attached cow carcasses to the hook and lowered them into the water near the ocean floor. A few feet away from the hook was multiple cameras and lights to observe any sea life that might devour the carcass. Uncle Jay said they had about 10 carcasses. They would begin their journey in the northern portion, lower the carcasses into the water for a few days, and move south along the ridge, repeating this process. When the carcasses were lowered in the ship would power down all engines and simply drift. If they drifted away from the ridge, they would power up and very slowly move back into position. Because this was a rather low-budget mission, the cameras on the hook didn't provide a live feed, and all footage was thoroughly examined after. That was about 48 hours of footage they had to sift through after each time they pulled up the hook. They had been at this for about a week and had not made any new discoveries, but did gain valuable footage of rarely seen sea life consuming the cows. At this point in the story, Uncle Jay said everything was going according to plan. The seas were calm and everyone on board was enjoying their time. They were onto their 5th cow carcass. It was about 5 p.m. and they hooked it up and lowered it into the water. This portion of the ridge was about 3,500 meters deep and was pushing the limit of how much cable they had on the crane. Now, for this mission, 2 of the marine biologists were required to monitor the crane and their location in relation to the ridge at all times. My uncle and another biologist drew the short straw and had to watch overnight. They would swap out around 9 a.m. Uncle Jay said it was an uneventful night. Him and the other biologists chatted all night and bounced different theories off each other. Around 7 a.m., just as the sun was rising, all was calm. Almost too calm, Jay remarked. They hadn't drifted off course throughout the night. The ocean was just like glass. Much of the crew was beginning to rise as well, but what happens next is a complete shock to everyone on board. It's important to note that the crane had been angled off the right side of the ship. All of a sudden, and very rapidly, the 80-meter-long vessel began listing to the right side. It was almost as if something grabbed the hook and began pulling it deeper. My uncle said the immediate panic he felt was unlike anything he had ever experienced. He said it felt like the ship was going to capsize. They immediately sounded the ship's onboard alarm system to notify the crew of an emergency. Once they had their facilities in order, after the initial shock, my uncle ordered the other biologists to begin reeling in the crane. Since the cabling was so long, it would take about 20 minutes to completely reel in the line. The other biologists began to reel in the crane, but the winch was struggling and the ship was leaning more and more into the water. My uncle said that just as the water began to pour over the right side of the ship, it smacked back down to an upright position. He was sent flying into some containers. Many of the crew had begun to come out now as well. There was several injured on board, but nothing was life-threatening. Over the next 20 minutes as the crane was still retracting the line, the crew assessed their injured and any damage to the ship. My uncle was ultimately uninjured despite being thrown around. He said waiting for the line to come up was the longest 20 minutes of his life. Everyone was in complete shock as to what just happened. 2 minutes of complete chaos and now all was calm again. When the crane returned to the surface, the cow carcass was completely gone and the large metal hook was slightly bent. A few of the cameras was missing, but thankfully not all. The cow carcass being completely gone was the most interesting part, as in every other case it was never gone completely. The vessel's captain made the decision to head back shortly after this incident, much to the disappointment of the biologist, including my uncle, who wanted to find out what could have caused this. However, several onboard generators were damaged in the impact and they were essential to the ship's operation, so they had to return. My uncle believed it was because the CPT and ship's crew were terrified, and rightfully so. On the week-long journey back, the biologist examined over the footage to try to identify what caused this. The footage by all accounts was normal. There was the carcass about 10 meters off the seafloor, illuminated by the floodlights. Some small shrimp like sea life was feasting on the cow, when all of a sudden the cameras went black. Not as in they stopped recording, but something was covering them. The timestamp showed it was the correct time of the incident. After 2 minutes, the lights came back on and they could see again. It wasn't much though, as an enormous amount of sediment was kicked up from the ocean floor and now enveloped the view of the camera. While they were able to rule out the hook getting snagged on the bottom, they were never able to see what caused this. And that's how the story ends. No answer or explanation. That was it. They returned to port and reported their findings, but to my knowledge, nothing ever came of it. My uncle has his theories for what have caused this, ranging from a hungry sperm whale to giant squid to some unknown massive sea creature. Whatever it was must have been huge in order to devour a complete cow carcass in under 2 minutes and nearly capsize an 80-meter research vessel. While this story is outlandish and hard to believe, I have no reason to disagree with it. My uncle has never told any story that was similar to this. This is the only one that comes close to sea monsters in the unknown, but it makes you think what could really be out there, lurking in the deep ocean. Edit. To clarify any confusion about the cow carcasses, I asked my uncle to elaborate. On board the ship was a refrigerated container that they stored the carcasses in. He couldn't remember exactly where they got them from, but thinks it was from a local dairy farm. Once the cows reached the end of their lifespan, they would sell them off to local butchers, etc. In this case, a group of marine biologists bought them. Retired paramedic story time. I should write a book about my paramedic days. I posted this in a different r/ and had quite the response. Thought I'd share it here. Retired paramedic here. Had a call on a very desolate stretch of road for a car sitting in the middle of the road, covered in blood. Of course it has to happen at 2 a.m. just like every horror story. We arrive on scene and find a new Camaro sitting in the middle of the road that had obviously been hit in an accident. Problem is, there's absolutely nothing else around the car. No persons, no other vehicles, nothing. Part of my job then was a tactical paramedic for our sheriff's department. Sounds all exciting and high speed / low drag. Nope, not as a medic. I got paid to wait for stuff to happen and sit in the rear with the gear. This being said, my paramedic partner and I both had pistols in the ambulance. As we started approaching the Camaro, my partner is shining the light around when he says, really low, hushed and rushed, "Back, back, back. Now. He says. I shine my light in the car, and there's intestines wrapped around the gear shifter and a lung in the back seat, so we kind of freaked out. Called dispatch, let them know what's happening, and we are in the process of getting out of there till the cops show up when we see a figure appear walking down the road towards us. As he gets closer, we see he is covered in blood and gore. We both throw on our tactical vests, helmets, snatch our pistols as I sound like a frightened Home Alone 9-year-old on the radio to dispatch. We approach and start screaming at him to get on the ground, which he does. After everyone's heart rate is below 200 beats per minute, we start talking and figure out what happened. This guy had purchased a brand new Camaro and drove it to this desolate stretch of road to open it up. He said 1 minute he is shifting gears, and the next thing he knows his car is all over the road and his mouth was full of blood and it seemed like an explosion had went off. I start looking for injuries all over and can't really see anything major and ask him about the passenger in his car. He says, "What passenger?" My partner says, "There's a lung in your back seat." Dude goes straight into mental overload and can't come up with anything, so I'm thinking he's hurt. Get him in the ambulance. Police are 5 minutes away. We potentially have another victim out here. I have to go look by myself. I walk through the crash scene, look into the car, and sure enough, intestines wrapped around the gear shifter, lung in the back seat, looks like part of a liver, looks like a hand grenade went off inside the car. I walk around the other side of the car and see a faint blood smear / stain on the road. Walk to it, see something else further down the road, so I keep walking towards it. I finally see something on the side of the road and run up to it. Honestly, completely freaked out and scared to death about the body I was about to see. And the dude had hit a deer. What happened is when he was winding the car out, state police estimated him well over 100 miles an hour, a deer jumped into his car's pathway and hit the top corner of the windshield with its stomach. When the windshield crashed, it created a negative vacuum in the car, sucking almost all the deer's organs out and into the car and all over him. I had the fire department decontaminate him, wrapped him in some blankets, and took him to the hospital. For many, many years after, my wonderful 911 dispatchers happily played the recording for anyone who wished to hear it. The creep in the woods that underestimated me. I had a summer job when I was a 15-year-old girl that was a few miles from my house. I lived in a rural wooded area, and my parents never let me go into the woods by myself, but they worked days and my job started at noon every day, so I had to walk to work. I chose to disobey them and walk through the woods, instead of on the road, to work because it cut about a mile off my walk. So every day, at the same time, I'd walk through the very much abandoned state forest down a deer path for a mile or so until it intercepted a railroad track, then I'd walk a couple more miles down the railroad track into town to my job. Stupid, I know, but I was 15. Taking this path always freaked me out and I always felt like I was being watched, but it was shorter and less sunny and less hot, and so I ignored my instincts thinking my parents' influence was just making me paranoid. My parents would pick me up after my shift unaware of my daily routine. This continued for weeks. One day, I'm walking about a mile from any houses, deep in the woods, and there are 2 Corn magazine pages that had been ripped out and placed on the trail facing me. They hadn't been there the day before. I was completely creeped out as they were clearly intentionally placed and probably for me since very few people utilize this area, but I kept walking because if I turned around at this point, I'd have to go further to get out of the woods, and then there was a huge hill to climb to get back to my house and no one would be around there to help me anyways. There was a densely wooded area with brambles and dogwood and rolling hills, so I couldn't see very far in any direction. Suddenly, I could hear someone else walking close by. I stopped and I would hear them for a split second, and then they would stop. They sounded like they would change in their pocket, so I knew it was an animal, but because of the echo, I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Just to check that I wasn't crazy, I stopped once more and heard the same noise, which quickly stopped when I stopped. That's when I knew I was being stalked. My heart was racing with fear and my vision went blurry, but my instincts told me not to speak and not to run, but just keep walking down the dense deer path further into the woods. My gut told me not to look behind me. I could sense there was someone right behind me on the deer path now, but I did not look back. Now I'm a rather short, slightly chubby person, always have been, and looking at me you'd probably assume that I couldn't run very fast, so if you wanted to catch me deep in the woods you might assume you would have plenty of time to do so. And looking back, I think that is exactly what this creep was thinking. But back then I ran cross country and track and could probably run a 7-minute mile, and hills were my specialty. I always placed really well in the hilly terrain. By no means was I a great runner, but certainly I was likely faster than whatever pedo creep was hanging out in the woods stalking a little girl. It's not that I was processing this thought at the time, I just instinctually knew not to run. Yet. I kept walking seemingly deeper into the woods because I knew the train track was up ahead where there would be more space to run without tripping or getting caught in the tree branches. It was terrifying to not look back, but something told me not to. While I walked, I felt like my entire body was shutting down. It's a feeling I've never felt before or after that day. It was the feeling of being prey. Everything went blurry, and I could feel blood pulsing in my ears and my heart was pounding. I just kept walking like nothing was happening and did not turn around, but I felt someone maybe 5 or 10 feet behind me at this point, following me for a good 1/8 of a mile. I didn't turn around. I didn't scream because I knew no one would hear me. As soon as I got near the train tracks, which are elevated along a man-made gravel mound, I ran. And then I ran on all 4s up the hill, gripping onto 2 weeds to pull myself up faster, and then I sprinted along the tracks as fast as my lungs and legs could carry me. I heard and saw branches snapping below me in the woods, but now I was out in the sun, and the woods were dark, so I couldn't see what was behind the branches. I just kept sprinting. I never even saw the person, but I knew their intentions were awful. I never cut through the woods again, and I didn't mention what happened to my parents until I was 18, and I moved out of the house. I was too afraid of being grounded. A man in the dark. Hi all, this happened to me about 11 years ago, when walking home from a friend's house at night. I'll just get straight into it. I used to live in a rural part of the UK, and I've lived in rural areas most of my life, so I was used to long walks, occasionally at night, especially before I could drive. They never bothered me too much. I get creeped out occasionally, but this one night was the most terrifying experience I ever had. There was this one friend who lived roughly 3 miles away from my house. He had cool parents, and my other friends and I would often go over to his house and play video games and just hang out. Occasionally, this meant walking home at night if I stayed late. There were 2 ways back from my house. The roadway, which was about 5 miles long and took about 30 to 45 minutes. The roads were very quiet and eerie sometimes, but they were lit by street lamps, so it never bothered me walking this way. The other way was a shortcut through some woods, which took off about 2 miles. And the wooded bit was about a mile or so long. I often favored the wooded shortcut and have probably walked it over 100 times. The woods were dark, however, combined with the lack of ambient light due to living in rural areas, and you had an absolute abysmal darkness. Luckily, most of the time I had my phone light to walk with, but sometimes my phone would die or the battery would be so low that the flash wouldn't work and I'd have to use my screen light. As you've probably guessed by now, this was one of those occasions. I remember my friends and I had just finished watching a film. It was nearing 10 p.m., so we all left my friend's house and headed our separate ways home. I contemplated briefly which way I should go and decided to take the shortcut through the woods. I started walking away from his house and towards the path that headed into the woods. The streetlights dimmed as I entered the fields before the woods. I glanced at my phone and saw my battery was really low. Only enough power left for a couple minutes of flash, and then I'd have to use my screen for light. That wouldn't last the whole way either. As I saw the tree line approaching, I switched on the flash and followed the well-trodden path into the darkness. To my dismay, my light died within seconds of entering, and I flipped my phone over to try and shine the way using the screen. As I walked, I looked out for all the familiar landmarks I was used to seeing, to ensure I was heading in the right direction. Funky tree stump, check. Half-fallen fir tree, check. Enormous puddle I had to jump over, check. All was going well. I was halfway through the woods when my phone completely died. I remember the moment it happened. I was engulfed in darkness. I'm not sure if you've ever experienced this level of darkness before, but it was so dark I couldn't even see the outline of my hand centimeters in front of my face. Naturally, my pace slowed considerably, and I started holding my hand out in front of me to make sure I wasn't going to walk into a tree or something. I continued walking for another minute or so, until all of a sudden a pungent smell hit me. Cigarette smoke. I glanced around but couldn't see anything. Then I heard it. A cough. I wasn't alone. Thoughts raced through my head. Who would be out in the woods in the dark? Are they following me? Am I lost? I quickened my pace again, throwing a little caution to the wind. I carried on walking and tripped slightly on a branch. As I regained my balance, I heard another sound. Branches breaking underfoot. What sounded like right behind me. The snapping turned into fast footsteps that grew louder and louder. I started sprinting. I felt the well-trodden path turn to brush. I felt branches, logs, and plants hitting my legs. It wasn't long before I fell. Hard. I was lying on the floor, holding my knee. I could still hear branches snapping around me and a voice muttering something. I didn't dare move. Then, all of a sudden, they turned on a torch. I couldn't see anything except for the beam of light which seemed to be eaten quickly by the darkness of the forest. I lay motionless on the ground as the beam swept through the trees. I could still hear the person mumbling a deep growl. The crunching of footfalls grew and grew. They were only several feet away from me at this point. I couldn't breathe. The light went out, the snapping of branches grew, and then, nothing. Quiet. My eyes were wide open, but I couldn't see anything. Then I could hear wheezing, right above me. I wanted to cry. I wasn't sure if the person could see me or not. They could have been staring right at me and I wouldn't know. This carried on for about 5 minutes until the crunching of leaves and snapping of twigs started up again and I got fainter and fainter as they moved away from me. I remained lying down for another 5 or 10 minutes, contemplating my escape. Like an idiot, I'd ran off the path and wasn't sure which way back to it or was home. I didn't really care, I thought. I was going to walk in one direction until I left the woods and got home from there. I knew as soon as I started moving again, if the person was still in the woods, they would hear me. Should I run or try and sneak out? I opted for the latter. I slowly rose to my feet, listening constantly to my surroundings, picked a direction and started walking. I wasn't perfectly quiet, but quiet enough to be sure I wouldn't be heard from too far away. I kept hearing snapping sounds and rustling in the distance, and every time I froze, I'd hold my breath until I was happy no one was there and then start walking again. I repeated this pattern for what felt like an eternity until eventually I found the path. I screamed for joy in my mind and sped up my pace. After another 10 minutes, I saw it. Light. Streetlights filtering in through the trees. I'd never been so happy to see a meager street lamp, but as I progressed to the end of the woods, my heart sank. At the end of the path was a black silhouette, unmoving. Contrasted against the light background was the dark figure of a man. What should I do? Maybe it's a different person. Perhaps it's someone walking their dog. I froze and watched them silently, but they didn't move. At all. They just stood there like they were guarding the entrance to the woods. I didn't know what to do. By this point, I'd have enough. I was so close to getting out, I decided to just run straight towards the exit, straight towards them. I was a 6-foot young man. If they wanted to stop me, they'd have a hard job of it, I thought. So that's what I did. I started sprinting. The figure grew and grew, and as I reached them, I stepped to the side. I heard someone growl, "Fuck," loudly, and felt something clip the back of my head and tug the back of my jacket. I cleared the sheep gate in one leap and sprinted into the light. I eventually stopped running when I could see the first house and looked back. The entrance to the woods was quite far away now, and I couldn't see anyone standing by the entrance. Relaxing a bit more now, I finished my walk home. That's pretty much it. I know I could have overreacted. It could have been someone out for a walk in the woods, a dog walker or camper, but what I thought was strange was that they didn't use their torch except briefly on one occasion. Once they heard me, they also actively seeked me out. Who knows what they would have done if they caught me. In any case, I never walked that way home alone again. Not at night anyways. If you see someone waving you down on a desolate highway, don't stop. I was on an assignment for the Army, making my way up from San Antonio, Texas to Tacoma, Washington. It was a long drive, so they gave me 6 days to report to my new unit. But I didn't mind. I love road trips. There's nothing like the freedom of exploring the world by yourself. The first day of my journey, I planned to get as much driving in as possible so I could spend a few days in Utah. A sort of mini vacation, you could say. This was January and the days were short, so maximizing the amount of daylight I had was crucial. I got up early in the mornings, carried the last of my bags out to my Corolla, signed out of my old unit, and hit the road at roughly 5 a.m. It was an amazing day. I saw the landscape transform around me as I headed farther west than I had ever been in my life. From the San Antonio metropolitan area to the savannas of Edwards Plateau to the pancake flat farmland of the Great Plains region, America's breadbasket. Finally, the farms opened up into prairie, and I saw the "Welcome to New Mexico, the land of enrichment" sign. Now I was really in the middle of nowhere. Continuing on the US Route 380, I eventually found myself in Roswell. I could have gotten a few more hours of driving in and made it to Albuquerque, but I figured since I was in no rush, I might as well see what Roswell had to offer. Who knows if I could get a chance to visit again. As a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious, as Mr. Ballin would say, I took a self-guided tour of the shops and attractions. The next day I continued to Albuquerque, then westward on Interstate 40. By the time I reached Gallup and started northbound on US Route 491, I still had 2 hours of driving left before crossing the border into Colorado, and another 45 minutes before I could get to the Cortez, my planned stop for the night. However, my daylight was already running out as sunset was at 6 p.m. I got Starbucks and refreshed myself for the final stretch. It was supposed to be easy, just a straight shot, but looking back on it now, I figured that, had I decided to stop in Albuquerque instead of Roswell the night previous, I would have already been in Colorado by now, and possibly by making my way into Utah. I would have saved myself from what was waiting for me on the desolate highway. Route 491 stretched far into the Navajo Nation. On either side were endless expanses of prairie bookended by dark indigo mountains on the horizon. To my left, the sky glowed a faint orange-purple, the light slowly dying down like smoldering embers in a fire, until finally plunging the land into darkness. Every now and then, I would see a forlorn headlights of another car passing by, which gave me a bit of relief that I wasn't alone. I also had my road trip playlist on to keep me company, and call me ironic, but Hotel California was playing. After passing the small, lonely town of Newcomb, the next place of civilization would be Shiprock. However, between the two was a 36-mile stretch of absolute nothingness, an abyss I had to cross. I was not ready for what I was about to witness. After several miles, and having not seen another car on the road, I saw something strange emerge from the horizon. Barely lit by the moonlight, I thought it was a road sign at first. Then as I came closer, I realized it was a person, walking on the shoulder of the road, heading in my direction. I squinted, trying my hardest to focus on the figure. In the darkness, I could tell they were wearing a poncho of some sort, with long black hair flowing down their chest. Who could be walking out here, all alone at night? I thought. Whoever it was, they had no lights, no reflectors, no strobes of any kind to signal to passing cars that they were there. They walked on the pavement, dangerously close to oncoming traffic. I pulled to the left a bit, giving the wide berth. Suddenly, my stereo cut out, as if I had turned it off. The screen went completely dark and my phone disconnected from Bluetooth, which was unusual. It certainly did happen from time to time, so I thought nothing of it. As I approached, I saw the person raise their right arm, as if to flag me down and hitch a ride. Oh no, I thought. There's no way that's happening, buddy. As my headlights swept by, I realized it was a man, dressed in a button-up shirt, a wool poncho, jeans, and cowboy boots. His large belt buckle glinted as the lights passed him, but in that split second I realized with abject shock that not only were his eyes painfully wide open, but they seemed to be tracking me. Somehow he was able to see me through the glare of my headlights and look me dead in the eyes, not breaking contact until I passed. I was shaken for a bit, but my nerves gradually subsided. My stereo abruptly turned back on and my music continued playing. I brushed everything off as simply my imagination. The darkness and the shadows playing tricks on my mind. Besides, the man was behind me. I figured he must have been drunk. Indian reservations sadly had high rates of alcoholism. I looked at my rearview mirror. He was gone. I couldn't see him. Maybe he's too far behind me? No, that couldn't be. It must be too dark. Maybe. I drove on, trying to figure out what just happened, but at the same time forcing myself not to think about it. Just when I thought I had moved on, I saw another shape in the distance. Getting closer, I realized it was another figure. Another person walking alone at night? There's no way. They walked along the shoulder of the road, swaying back and forth. Slowly, I could make out this person was also wearing a poncho. Then I saw what looked like long, black hair reaching down past the chest. No, there's no way. It was the man. The same man. But how? The man raised his arm again, trying to flag me down. What did this guy want? I kept up my pace with no intention of stopping for any reason. Just like last time, my stereo turned off again. Suddenly, the man leapt out onto the road, arms waving frantically. I swerved into the left lane, narrowly avoiding him. In my headlights, I noticed he had the same wide-eyed look, his gaze locked onto mine. I also saw that his clothes did not look as they did the first encounter. Once they were clean, if not well worn, but now they were soiled and tattered, rags barely hanging on to his withered frame. His hair was wild and unkempt, with clods of dried dirt stuck in his locks, but his eyes remained the same. My heart nearly burst through my chest at the sudden shock. Hyperventilating, I slowed down and glanced into the rearview mirror to make sure he was alright. Nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to see. The man was running. He was sprinting towards me. I centered the wheel and accelerated, hoping to get as much distance from him as possible, but as I continued to speed up, so did he. Faster and faster I drove, but every time I looked into the mirror, I would see him right behind me, perfectly keeping my pace. His body tinted red by my taillights. I could feel my temples throbbing and my hands getting slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I was sick to my stomach. There's no way. I looked forward, hoping to see a faint glimmer of light from the town ahead, but I was still too far away. I looked back at the rearview mirror. The man was gone. I should have been relieved, but I knew better. Where did he go? I looked around, hoping to regain a visual on him. I couldn't see anything. Taking a deep breath, I refocused on the road, but kept my guard up. Just keep driving, I told myself. Only a few more miles to go. Out of the corner of my right eye, I saw something. Another shape. It wasn't the man, at least I didn't think so. I glanced over, bracing myself for whatever was going to meet my sight. It looked like an animal, some kind of animal, though I couldn't make out exactly what it was. Under the moonlight, I could see it running alongside my car, its forelimbs reaching out in long strides, its back undulating like a dog. Closer and closer it came. The closer it was, the more of it I could see. Little by little. Then I noticed its limbs were far too long for its body. Its body was too short. It had no tail. The head was oddly round, and from it came a long trail of black hair. I slammed my foot on the gas, pushed my car's engine harder than it had ever been pushed before. By now I was clocking well over 110 miles an hour, but this creature, it kept up. It wasn't phased, it simply ran faster and faster to match my speed. Just what was I thinking? How could anyone or anything run this fast? The entity seemed to have endless stamina. Just how long could it keep up? Just how much faster could it go? Soon my car would hit its top speed, and then what? How long could it maintain that before breaking down? It wouldn't be long until my engine overheats, but regardless, I would eventually run out of gas, and when I do, what would happen if that thing got me? At 120 miles an hour, my car had reached its limit. This was the fastest I could go, but the creature continued its pursuit. My temperature gauge was approaching the red, and so was my tachometer. I couldn't keep this up any longer. Suddenly, like the beacon of a lighthouse on the tumultuous sea, the first light of Shiprock came into view. It was close. So close. If I could just go a little bit longer, I could make it into town safely. I pressed on. I fixed my eyes on the lights, growing brighter on the horizon. They bloomed outwards, glimmering in the night air. Though it was a small town, it was a sight for sore eyes in my situation. Looking into my periphery, I saw the mutilation of this creature's spine as it kept pace with my car. But now it was slipping away, steering farther and farther from the road. It suddenly hit me just how hard my heart was beating. Beads of sweat dripped down my face. I looked over. The creature was gone. But this time the feeling of dread had also gone with it. My stereo once again turned back on, and as my music resumed, I breathed a deep sigh of relief. I let off the accelerator. The man, the creature, whatever it was finally gone for good. Having white-knuckled the steering wheel the whole time without realizing it, my hands were extremely sore, but I was glad to have made it through it. A week later, I told another soldier in my unit about what I experienced. Being originally from Albuquerque, she was familiar with the Native American legends of the Southwest. The conversation steered toward a certain creature that she would not dare speak the name of. She also told me that the highway I took was well known for all sorts of paranormal phenomena. Google what Route 491 used to be called, and everything will make sense. Be careful out there. And alright, anyways, that wraps up Reddit horror stories. I really hope you all enjoyed this video. I enjoyed recording it and all of it. Let me know if you'd like to see more like this in the future. And anyways, thank you so much for watching to the end. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. It helps a ton. And yeah, just once again, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, see ya. The internet is the largest creation in human history. It connects every corner of the planet. Every thought, every obsession, every secret, all flowing through the same endless network of screens. But if you dig deep enough, you'll find corners that were never meant to be seen. Pages that feel wrong. Videos and pictures that shouldn't exist. Today, we're diving into those dark corners, into the cases that remain unsolved. And before we begin, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join the Patreon for early access and uncensored versions of every video, and many, many more perks. And without further ado, let's get into the internet's darkest mysteries. And before we begin, a quick warning. The following case is based on public speculation and publicly available information. Nothing discussed here has been proven, and no one mentioned should be assumed guilty of any crime. Please do not contact, harass, or investigate anyone named or shown in this piece. This content is for educational and documentary purposes only. Let's begin. The Instagram Blue Pages. In my search for news stories, I came across this Reddit post titled, "Dozens of Weird Instagram Accounts with Seemingly Random Symbols." The poster provides 5 screenshots of different accounts, each with mysterious blue artwork and drawn symbols. Shapes like 8-pointed stars, circles, spirals, squares with dots, clovers, concentric circles, and each account is following only one other account. Another user with another set of strange blue photos, with the same graphics and color schemes. This chain goes on for something like 30 accounts, then the chain circles back. At first it seems innocuous enough, just some weird AI-generated art. But one commenter, Just a Dude 3X, provided a theory. Oof, this might be steganography, and given the context how you found it, you probably should report it. Further down, Just a Dude 3X explains what steganography is. It's basically a random image, but some pixels are slightly changed in color. If you look at it, you see a normal picture, but a software can extract data out of the way the pixels are changed. There might be a different picture, or even video or audio encoded in these pictures. So, the user thinks it should be reported, but why? They seem innocent enough. If the assumption is that these images could be hiding other content, other images, what are they? Well, I began looking through the 30 accounts, and within a couple of minutes, something felt off. The images weren't AI generated. These were hand-drawn, blue spirals, circles, odd posts that blended emojis or video play buttons, on posts with no art, just a blank white background. I saw 13 likes, 20, 100, 200. In one of the most shocking profiles, named Friend de la Pau, holds a cryptic message. Reversed, that username reads La Petite Dernière, which translates to the youngest in the family. On the account Troyes_images, which translates to 3 images, there are only 3 blue images. Some strange comments written in different languages have odd or disturbing meanings when translated. In Russian, one user writes, "A whole year has flown by, and you haven't changed at all. You look great. Do you still remember me?" Another in French writes, "The girl's really sexy." Another user comments, 3 heart emojis, and 2 clap emojis. But what are they commenting about? The comments don't seem consistent with the seemingly random image. Redditors started coming up with theories about the blue pages. One theory, proposed by Bored Frankie, seemed to set this mystery to rest. I'm like 99% sure that this is an experimental art exhibition being put on by an individual in Place de Fêtes by the name of Papi Camion, which translates to Grandpa Truck, who is known in Paris art scene for having a really wacky truck. I say this because, at the very bottom of the Instagram account, Marie Jean Claude, which appears to be the central account, there are a bunch of seemingly normal, at least in comparison, pictures of the truck and items inside the truck. Someone, another artist, because again, people in the art scene know him, commented on an old picture. "Papi, is it really you?" And he responded confirming that it was. He also says in the other comments that he's doing something experimental. Looking into Papi Cameron, it appears that he's just a dude with an interesting truck. He did an interview with Iodine Zine in 2015 where they write, mind you, this is all translated from French, that he was born in the 1970s and let go progressively over time of unnecessary matters, and has only kept a passport, a change of clothes, and a van. And since then, he has been navigating the world as a hermit, sort of a van life situation. Papi Caramion's truck had been photographed numerous times, such as by this photographer under Edition, and he is widely loved in the art world. If you go on the hashtag Papi Cameron or Papi Cameron on Instagram, there are dozens of pictures of him in his truck. Many of the posts are of him and hashtags with things like urban art or exhibit, and are posted by other artists themselves. In a post under the hashtag Papi Cameron, there is a picture of him standing outside of the truck. The person who posted it is an artist slash photographer slash fashion designer slash whatever, who said they were shooting with Papi Cameron and some models. A photographer with 40,000 followers who commented on that post in a way that insinuates to them knowing Papi also follows the Mary Claude Jean account. I found that they've legitimately done shoots together on her website too. Basically what I'm saying is that real, successful people know him and follow him on purpose. I think he's probably doing something art related, perhaps, or is unfortunately suffering from mental illness. I think the likelihood of it being something more sinister is slim. This initially brought me comfort. All of this was just an art exhibition by a popular French artist, but I still couldn't shake a bad gut feeling. So I went to the account titled Mary Claude Jean to see if I could find anything out of the ordinary. Again, more hand-drawn artwork, bright blue and cryptic. The same symbols that persist through all of the accounts were appearing here too. But this account was different. The stories on Marie Claude Jean's account were disturbing and weird. There are 4 videos. 2 of them are of a couple playing a ball game of some sort. The other 2 videos are of children, 2 girls outside of a van, as their parents unload the vehicle. After seeing these videos, I came to suspect that maybe this wasn't just an art project, and maybe their intentions could be more nefarious. Someone asked how the original poster had come across these images in the first place, and his explanation was damning. I should add context. I found creepy accounts linked with predatory behavior, and when I looked into this, I found these as well. One account has a highlight of recording children going to their car. It's disgusting. I'm thinking this is something to do with a ring of predators, but I don't know anything about it. Looks like the OP had discovered the same videos I had, and his concerns were very clear. According to their speculation, this might have something to do with people attracted to children. So, what does steganography have to do with any of this? The images that could allegedly be hidden inside these coded blue posts, well, if the theory is to be believed, then these posts might be hiding something more sinister. Something the commenters described as sexy and beautiful. Allegedly, Redditors speculate, these images could be hiding cheese pizza. And it doesn't stop at the blue page accounts. See, one commenter, DamnPlayer23, did his own research and began investigating even further. Hey, I just did a deep dive. If you got to their tag posts, there's thousands of accounts, all with thousands of posts. This is extremely disturbing and should be reported to authorities. And the commenter was correct. In my research, I found hundreds, thousands of other users, either following the blue page accounts or tagged in their posts. I began the investigation with one of the blue page accounts called Noilipap, but this account specifically had hundreds of tagged images and hundreds of followers, just like the commenter said. So I followed the trail, and what I found made me genuinely nauseous. Barbies. Now, this is all suspicious but not damning in and of itself. There are tons of art accounts on Instagram. Perhaps people have gotten a recommended white image from one of these accounts and thought, wow, what a beautiful piece of modern art. Clap emoji, heart eyes. Sure, it could all be perfectly innocent, but what if there was something else happening beneath the surface? I wanted more information. And the thousands of photos, most had very few interactions, few comments, few likes, but thousands of followers. And the comments were all suspiciously similar. The commenters used the same emojis: blue hearts, heart eyes, fire emojis, and butterflies. And they all followed Noilipap in one way or another, somewhere down the massive chain. So, what does this all mean? How do emojis do anything to confirm or dismiss the cheese pizza theory? Couldn't these just be normal art accounts? Well, this could very well be the case, and I wouldn't mention it if these weren't popular, well-known child lover symbols. The color blue, blue hearts, and butterflies, these are well-known codes that government officials and investigators are well aware of. In the past, predators have used these symbols and colors to communicate hidden messages and their tastes. One that caught my attention was the butterfly. The emoji is based on a specific species of butterfly, known as the papillon. It's famous for its striking blue and black coloring, but online, it has a secret meaning. To child lovers, it signals that the user has no preference for gender. Boys or girls are both accepted. I remembered the account that led me down the rabbit hole in the first place. The one with hundreds of tags and followers, Noilipap, well, it hit me. Noilipap backwards is papillon. Now, I will say this again. All of this could just be art accounts following one another, but all of this together is more than a little suspicious. Down the follower rabbit hole, I landed on an art account and a user going by the name Candy Bacosa. All of her posts are Barbie themed, with dolls and sets that make it look like a fashion designer's Instagram. And although the whole page is incredibly odd, this again isn't proof that there's anything weird going on. But the papillon butterfly was a prevalent symbol in her account description. And she was a frequent commenter on the Blue Pages posts. So once again, I came to suspect that even these images weren't just images, and I began to dig deeper. On her story, I found a photo of two Barbie dolls lying in the grass, skirts up, revealing their underwear. It began to remind me of another Instagram account, one more prolific, disgusting, and disturbing. Smart Schoolboy 9 was one of the most infamous and unsettling Instagram accounts ever uncovered in 2024. He was a child lover. People believed Smart Schoolboy 9 was part of a much larger problem. Similar child lover pages communicating through the supposed artistic expression and his followers, when investigated, were often just as interested in childish fantasies. A couple of years ago, his page was taken down after mass attention and scrutiny, but even when it disappeared, copies and clones began to surface. Accounts with similar names, reposted content, and identical aesthetics. This disgusting man, sadly, had some fans. In the blue page accounts and the mass of followers I discovered, it felt eerily similar. And that's when I came across a comment. One that had drawn a startling comparison themselves. The user writes, recent comment on the page called account, I'm not going to read it out. A user commented, "Bro likes to diddle kids," and today responded to another user saying, for context, this guy was mutuals with Smart Schoolboy 9. It's really old speculation that they were up to no good. Welcome to the thread. An alleged connection between the blue pages and Smart Schoolboy 9, a known predator. But I couldn't find any recorded proof that this is true, so take it with a grain of salt. But it doesn't end there. Let's go back to the Instagram blue page accounts. As I was collecting screenshots from these accounts, I noticed a recurring pattern. Certain symbols were repeated over and over again. The clover, the square with dots, the circles. And I noticed that, especially on Nollipop's account, they weren't just random. They were laid out in grids. Some of them even looked like code. To me, it looked like a cryptogram. Messages written in code, and they could be seen across all of the blue page accounts. So I screenshotted the images and submitted them to an AI because I'm not a cryptographer, to see if the program could find some code hidden within the images. And it did. The AI determined, yes, this was in fact a substitution cryptogram. A substitution cryptogram is when letters or numbers are replaced by images or symbols. If you carefully analyze the patterns, you can determine what the coded messages are. Now, this is AI we're talking about, and this could very well be an overzealous program looking for patterns that aren't there. But the message it provided made the whole thing that much more interesting. The codex is as follows. Target, circle plus crosshair is T, plus is E, 6 petal rosette / flower is O, clover / four lobe is S, 8-point star is A, 4 small corner dot is F, quartered circle is C, single outline square is N, stacked / overlapping squares is H, often also used as space, circle with a center dot is I, a large X is K, circle containing a small square is D, 3x3 grid square is R, plain circle is usually O, circle with diagonal slash is U. And the 4 words that allegedly repeat over and over across the account: to see, click, save. If we were to speculate for a moment, if this were truly cheese pizza, and that's a big if, how might prospective predators access the alleged photos? They'd have to get the images out of the artwork somehow, right? Well, how might they do that? Well, they'd need to buy a program, some sort of software to decode the images and pull out the real image and follow the instructions provided. When I was 16, 2 people from my high school were caught with tens of thousands of inappropriate young photos. They happened years apart from one another, and they're both in jail. One a student, the other a teacher. And I've always wondered, for years, how people get caught with so much cheese pizza. Where are they getting it from? The dark web? How are they accessing so much content without getting caught? It can't be that easy to get content like this, and especially thousands of images. How do they go years and years without getting caught? If the theory on Reddit about the blue pages is correct, then the answer would be simple. They wouldn't need to dig to get what they wanted. It wouldn't be some dark web backroom or content locked behind a password. It could be right there, on the surface web, hidden in plain sight on your Instagram feed. It's entirely possible that this could be something much, much worse than an art project. A multinational open-air marketplace for child lovers looking to buy and distribute disgusting photos and videos, and it might be happening right on Instagram, the most popular photo sharing app to date. But it's also possible that this is all just an art project. And frankly, I don't know what's true. There's just not enough information to make an actual case for either theory about the Instagram blue pages. This is all speculative. There is no actual proof, only alleged evidence and supposed connections drawn that could admittedly be wrong. Regardless, the Instagram blue pages has become one of the most weird, unsettling, and mysterious stories I've ever covered. And in all honesty, I'm the first YouTuber to cover this, and I'm very curious as to what it truly means. The 4chan murders. 4chan is an image board website modeled after the Japanese site 2chan. The site is divided into boards dedicated to different topics, ranging from anime, video games, and technology to politics, fitness, and adult content. Its B board, which serves as the random content thread, is especially notorious for shock content, trolling, and depraved media. On the 21st of August, 2015, an untitled thread was started on 4chan's random board. The user began the post with a short paragraph. "I have killed several women for pleasure. If you can guess a name, I will upload a picture. If you can guess a name of any of these women, I will upload their photo. No more than 10 names per post. Any more than that will be ignored. Some are Polaroids and others were taken with a disposable camera. I also have pictures of them before death when I was able to do so. If you guess all of the names, I will show you where I dumped a body in 1999. The first one is free, as her name is unlikely to be guessed." The user then posted an image, which showed a young woman's graduation photo, mid-20s, with curly black hair and a big smile. Next to it, a photo of a presumably dead woman, lying prone and covered in blood, with a striking resemblance to the woman in the graduation photograph, and below a handwritten timestamp on a piece of paper, provided by the user to prove its authenticity. The first photo had the date August 21st, 2005, written as the timestamp. Naturally, most users suspected this was a cruel hoax or a joke. After all, what are the odds a serial killer would post these images, possibly incriminating himself? It seemed beyond belief, and given the site's history of hoaxes and shock content, it was more likely some loser had staged the photos to get a rise out of users. But some people played along. They started to guess names, and one of them was correct. The killer replied, "Wow, off to a great start. Incredible. I fixed the timestamp. My mistake." And then with it, another photo. Another woman's body. This time, much more graphic. The corpse was completely naked, legs spread. Judging by the state of decay, she had been dead for some time. Below the photo, a corrected timestamp, reading August 21st, 2015, the exact date of posting. Shortly after, the killer shared another photo, presumably of the same victim, this time stuffed into a cardboard box, her legs sticking out from it, and her arms twisted unnaturally. "This is from before I played with her." He then posted another photo of the woman before being killed. This photo was taken by the killer, She was lying in bed, smiling at the camera. Accompanying this photo was yet another photo of her corpse. Needless to say, this unsensible content was immediately flagged by 4chan. In just 20 minutes after the initial thread was created, it was taken down by moderators, and all of the original content was lost. Except for the fact that one anonymous user took screenshots. All of the photos were subject to a reverse image search, which then revealed that none of the images, not a single one, had been ever posted before. These images had not originated online. They were originals, which meant that, although they had hoped otherwise, this was no hoax. This was, in fact, a serial killer. A user asked the question, how could you get these photos developed with a disposable camera? It's required to alert the police to anything weird going on in any photo that is developed. The killer replied, I developed them. If this was true, it would mean the killer had access to a dark room, but this seemed odd. Someone in 2015 having access to a personal darkroom to develop disposable camera photos was unlikely. It wasn't impossible, but it brought up more questions than answers. Users contacted the FBI and made them aware of the thread, but in the meantime, all they could do was wait. Then, a month later, to the shock of the users invested in the case, the anonymous poster returned to 4chan. August 22nd, 2015. A picture of a nude male victim, covered in blood. The photo had a strip of white paper over it, covering the victim's eyes, presumably to hide his identity. He's presumably sitting up in bed, shielding his face, leading users to believe he was still alive when the photograph was taken, badly injured. He might have been trying to defend himself. Regardless, the caption read, "Dying, dying." And just 7 minutes later, the user posted another photo of the man. This time, the caption simply read, "Dead." He then posted an image of a man, presumably himself, wearing a red ski mask and sunglasses, pointing a shotgun at the camera. Then he wrote his final message, "I'll be back in a month to finish our game. If it is not this exact timestamp with an updated date, it is not me." Though users waited for more updates from the killer, he never posted to 4chan again, and he has not been heard from since. In the second post, behind the photograph of the man, there is another photograph of a young woman, covered in blood, wearing a black bra and tattered clothes, lying on similar white sheets to a man. Upon inspection, I have determined this is the same woman from the original post. She's wearing the same clothes as the first victim, a brown threaded shirt and dark pants. This means that not only are all of these photos original, but there are multiple photos of the victims, more than were ever posted. Now, this is a startling revelation. This was not the work of someone attempting to shock users with faux crime scene photos. If so, why not post all of the photographs? Why not show us the full breadth of the depravity? In my opinion, this was the work of someone posting individual photos, hand-curated, to play a game without getting caught. After the original post was made, news reporters contacted local police after online sleuths identified the first victim by her graduation photo. The victim was Shauna Maynard, a runaway who was shot dead in 1998. The police attributed the post to a hoax, though they would not elaborate. They stated a lack of evidence and that there was no merit to the case. Shauna's killer has never been caught, and to this day, it is an unsolved case. So, Is it possible that she was killed by the 4chan user, then later dumped and shot to cover the actual cause of death? Or was Shauna a red herring, posted simply to throw the online investigation off, send them on a wild goose chase without ever revealing the actual victim? Once again, without more information, there seem to be more questions than answers. And although there have been attempts made to identify the other victims, there have been no more confirmed identifications. To this day, the true identity of the 4chan killer remains unknown. No one has ever been arrested in connection with these disturbing posts, and no law enforcement agency has confirmed whether the posts were authentic, staged, or stolen. Today, all that remains are the screenshots, grainy fragments of horrific scenes debated in late-night forums, and although users haven't given up on identifying the victims or finding the killer, there has been no ground made in a very long time. So, was it an elaborate hoax or a real serial killer who wanted to play a game? The only certainty is this: someone out there knows the truth. And if this truly was a game, since there have been no arrests made and no investigation has been announced, it looks like he's gotten away with it. The most dangerous cults don't start with violence. They start with belief. A charismatic leader, a world they claim is broken, and a promise that obedience will be rewarded. These cults don't hide in the shadows or the wilderness. They operate in plain sight as churches, communities, and spiritual movements. For years, they went unnoticed until families disappeared, children stopped going to school, and bodies began to surface. In today's video, we're examining some horrifying unknown cults that destroyed hundreds of lives without ever becoming household names. And make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's begin. The Mad Reverend of Shakahola, Kenya, 2003. It's a warm, sunny morning in the metropolitan capital city of Nairobi. Children are dressed in uniform, laughing and walking together through the doors of schoolhouses all over the city. Traffic in Nairobi is famously bad. Cars and buses begin congesting at sunrise, so school has to start early. For primary school, the morning assembly begins at 7:30 a.m. All of the children have lined up inside the school, and the teacher begins taking roll call. Brian is here, Emmanuel is here, Naomi is here, but John is not. The teacher moves on, but at the end of the day, she contacts the head teacher and tells him John was not in attendance. The head teacher is immediately concerned. John was a bright young boy of 9 years, with an infectious smile and a pleasant attitude. Last year, he never missed a day of school. In fact, he loved it. But this year was different. He hadn't shown up today, or yesterday, or the day before. In fact, he hadn't been seen for over 2 weeks. Police are called for a wellness check. They arrive at John's family home and knock. His mother answers. They ask if John is okay. And strangely enough, she says yes. He's inside, reading the Bible. They ask her why her son has not been attending school, and quickly, almost like she's reciting a script, the mother says, quote, "My son no longer attends primary school. Education is evil. Jesus dislikes education. Good day." And just like that, she shuts the door, and the conversation is over. The policemen are angry, confused, but they aren't surprised. In the past month, multiple children have been pulled from school, never to return. And when confronted, every parent says the exact same thing. Jesus frowns on education, the pastor says. What I just told you is based on actual court testimony. And that mysterious pastor, the one who convinced parents across Nairobi to pull their kids from school, well, he's the leader of one of the most horrible religious cults to ever exist. One so dark, so disturbing, I had to take multiple breaks while writing about it, and the entire communities of Kenyan citizens would fall victim to his gospel. The pastor's name was Paul Mackenzie, and I'll warn you now, this story does not have a happy ending. He began preaching in 1997. At the time, he was a taxi driver, and he would interpret the Bible for passengers, many of whom were repeat customers. When his shift was over, he'd take to the streets and do the same. Paul Mackenzie believed that the government and their institutions were corrupt, marked by the beast, and at the time, he wasn't really wrong. In the late 1990s, Kenya had a problem. They'd won their independence from British colonial rule in the 1960s, and for the next 2 decades, they reaped the benefits of a growing, thriving post-independence economy. Although in the 1970s, a man named Daniel Moi became president. He was the frontrunner for the dominant political party, the KANU, and took control in 1978. Technically, Kenya was a multi-party state, but politics were tightly controlled by Moi. Opposition was marginalized. Freedom of speech and freedom of the press were marginalized. Formerly democratic institutions were reduced to puppet institutions, and corruption became not just rampant, but obvious. There were multiple high-profile government scandals that sent the Kenyan people into a recession. Nobody wanted to invest in the corrupt government of Kenya. Social reform was proposed, but never properly instituted. The power of the Kenyan currency, the Kenyan shilling, faltered, and poverty became rampant. Inequality was at an all-time high. Growth was reduced to a 0%, and people were out of work in mass, all while government officials lined their pockets. And Paul Mackenzie was working in the beating heart of Kenya's largest and most impacted city. He wasn't just a taxi driver anymore. He was a preacher for the people. His interpretation of the Bible and his sermons reflected the grievances of many Kenyan citizens. He told them that not only was the Kenyan government corrupt, it was a bedlam of sin. The secular life they'd been living in, with its failing economy and infrastructure, it wasn't just uncomfortable, it was unholy. And he shared his radical beliefs with reverence and passion. He believed that education was not only unnecessary, but blasphemous, because it's never discussed in the Bible. Quote, "Pull your children from school. They're in the den of the beast." Jobs, too, weren't required to enter God's kingdom. In fact, they were discouraged. Quote, "Leave your earthly possessions behind. Become a true patron of God's kingdom." Hospitals were worldly, sinful places. If you went to a hospital for medical attention, you were blaspheming the power of God. Quote, "Jesus will heal your ailments. Put your trust in God and God alone." But Paul Mackenzie didn't want his followers to starve. He offered solutions. He could teach your children true biblical living. He could employ you to carry God's message, spread his gospel. He could heal you. And his following began to grow. Quote, "My mother stopped me from attending school because she believed education displeased Jesus. I had no power to object." And the abuse endured by the children only grew worse as time went on. They were under the strict supervision of Paul and his flock. The group implemented new rules like intermittent fasting, and parents extended these rules onto their children. Quote, "I went for days without eating. After stealing some food, I was beaten by his followers." Before long, he'd caught the attention of the local police. To them, he was no savior. They saw through his holier-than-thou act. He was a troublemaker, and his teachings were dangerous. On 4 separate occasions, he was arrested and charged with radicalization and encouraging parents to pull their children from schools. But there was no proof. At that time, there was no formal institution, just Paul Mackenzie. And if you didn't actually hear his sermons, how could you charge him? Well, you couldn't. He was never sent to jail, and every arrest proved to strengthen his foundation of belief and the loyalty of his following. Come 2003, a new idea began to develop. He wanted to start his own church, plant a flag somewhere safe, but he was very conscious of police attention. He was under the microscope, and he knew it. In order to execute his vision and avoid rearrest, he would need to leave Nairobi. Paul and a handful of loyalists moved to the coastal town of Malindi, a 9-hour drive from Nairobi. With a smaller population of 100,000 people, Paul was free to build a new institution without intervention. He called it the Good News International Church. They know education is evil, but they use it for their own gains. He says in one sermon, "Those who sell uniforms, write books, those who make pens, all kinds of rubbish, they use your money to enrich themselves while you become poor." Upon arrival, he set up a small settlement in Malindi and began preaching more vehemently. This time, with a small group of followers to support him, he made a bolder claim. He, and he alone, could speak with God directly. Everything that came out of his mouth was gospel. At one point, the church had a YouTube channel because apparently YouTube was perfectly fine for whatever reason, but logic is out of the window by this point. In one of their now deleted videos, a woman explains how she delivered a baby through prayer, without the need for a C-section. That same woman then had a revelation, presumably from the Holy Spirit, to go and warn her neighbors not to vaccinate their kids. And this is the madness he incited. People were vulnerable, impoverished, alone, isolated, and he took this as an opportunity to infect their minds with this made-up horseshit. And people wanted to believe in something, so they believed in him. They wanted a savior, and in lieu of Jesus himself, they unknowingly aligned with a false prophet. Around this time, another doctrine began to emerge. The world was ending. He predicted the world would end on April 15th, 2023. Salvation for the pious, damnation for the earthly sinner. And this new fact of life applied pressure to the people. They could risk living their sinful lives or join him for the promise of a blissful eternity. Over the next 13 years, he slowly seeded this fear into the minds of the villagers. By 2016, he had accrued approximately 1,000 followers. Pull your kids from school, God will teach you. Give up your earthly possessions, God will feed you. Abandon civil life, and God will protect you. And people did. Families were encouraged to sell their lands, houses, and possessions and give them to the church. If they wanted to see the pearly gates, they had to give up their bodies, minds, and riches to him. Who else would they give it to? The New World Order? The government? Those intent on destroying the Kenyan people? The Christian people? No, it would be better served with him. He encouraged one man to sell his property in Lamu for 20 million Kenyan shillings, approximately 200,000 USD. And the money the man made was donated right back to Paul Mackenzie. And this was just one of the biggest examples. Plenty of people were doing this all across Kenya, from Nairobi to Malindi, selling their earthly possessions and land, uprooting their lives, and traveling to convene with the Reverend Paul Mackenzie. He used this money to buy property in Malindi and Mombasa for living and for schools, as well as 2 vehicles. He also used the money to fund an unlicensed television broadcasting station, which is insane, but he was able to do it. And with this newfound power, he was able to quickly spread his doctrine of lies across the whole of Kenya via TV evangelism. Seeing the success this brought the church, dozens of other members with large properties and stores of wealth who were unwilling to let go of their possessions followed suit, routing all of the money to Paul Mackenzie. Come 2017, his follower counts had grown to 3,000 people from all over the nation, and a handful of followers from neighboring nations who had heard the good word of the Reverend Paul Mackenzie. And because of this, children weren't just being abused, they weren't just being starved, children began to die. Like I said before, the group didn't believe in medical care, so after hundreds of parents neglected the needs of their children, well, their stubborn loyalty to ecclesiasticism killed several children. And suddenly, the heat of police attention was back. And it wasn't just hot, it was angry. The police stormed the church and arrested Paul Mackenzie. Like before, Paul was charged with radicalization. But this time, he'd racked up charges of endangering children, running an unauthorized school, and operating an unsanctioned TV station. During the raid, 93 children were rescued. malnourished and frail from intermittent fasting and disease. Some were beaten, some were close to death. After his arrest, the television station was shut down. Now, you'd think that would be the end of Paul Mackenzie's reign of terror, but you'd be dead wrong. This story is just beginning, and it's about to get much, much worse. Paul Mackenzie is released from jail. He is acquitted of one charge, and another is dropped. Well, how did he manage that? I mean, now the police have proof, right? Well, like I said, by this time, he was filthy rich. He had money for good lawyers, and those lawyers fought for him tooth and nail. While this was happening, other religious leaders in the area, as well as government officials, condemned Paul for his history of abuse and radicalization. They denounced him for encouraging parents to pull their children from schools, for finagling innocent people out of their money, and for being just an all-around piece of shit. But there was more trouble brewing for Paul Mackenzie, and to understand it, we have to learn a little bit more about Kenyan politics. Now, by this time in 2019, Kenya has had two different presidents. The last was a spiritual successor to Daniel Moi, the man who created the economic problem to begin with. This successor was named Mwai Kibaki, though the economy became healthier during his reign. It was a menial change, a bandage, and the government was still rife with corruption. Still, he is considered one of Kenya's greatest presidents, but that's not who we're talking about here. But this new president, Uhuru Kenyatta, was supposed to be different. He was the son of Kenya's very first president, Jomo Kenyatta, who was revered for his strength. His son's presidency ran on a platform of infrastructure and developmental reform. He wanted to fix some of the problems created during the last two presidencies. But he had bigger eyes than a stomach for how to actually do that. He borrowed a ton of money from China, public debt skyrocketed, and although infrastructure like the major highways between Mombasa to Nairobi were fixed and improved, as well as strong investments in other highways, ports, and energy projects, all that money being spent made the cost of living skyrocket. And as his public approval rating tanked, he needed something big to sway voters back to him. So he implemented one of the biggest and most controversial public reforms in modern Kenyan history, Huduma Namba. Huduma Namba was essentially a proposal that would combine all of the citizens' government identification into one: ID, birth certificate, tax records, health services, voting info, all combined into one clean number. The actual adoption of this system was difficult. It was rolled out too quickly. There weren't proper safeguards, and it became a multi-billion-dollar thorn in the side of an already struggling Kenyan economy. But more than that, President Kenyatta needed the support of the people if they would only agree to adopt the system. However flawed, his campaign could recover. Now, I know all of you love Kenyan history as much as I do, but you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with anything we were previously talking about? Well, when Paul Mackenzie got out of jail, he began a massive campaign against Huduma Namba. He likens it to the mark of the beast. He calls it another example of the sinful, corrupt government trying to subdue the people. For the first time, he wasn't just preaching about injustice. He was directly confronting the people running the show. Not only did this preaching attract a whole host of new followers, it royally pissed off the president. In 2019, Paul was arrested again for inciting people against registration for Huduma Namba. But now he's also formally accused of brainwashing and kidnapping children. And this wasn't some local ordinance. It was a public, nationwide lashing by the president of Kenya. He was taking heat on the macro, and Paul was about to face the proverbial firing squad. After this incident, Paul was too scared to operate. He decides to disband his church, leave Malindi, and relocate to a remote 800-acre patch of land in the nearby Shakahoala forest. Finally, after almost 2 decades, it seemed like the Good News International Church was dead and gone. In fact, that's what Paul said to dissuade any further trouble. But, like always, he was lying. The government thought his church was dead, but in reality, it had just gone into hiding. Here it remained for 4 years, operating in the shadows, beneath the nose of officials, completely unregulated, completely isolated. And there, in the forest of Shakahola, the full horror of the beast that was Good News International Church reared its ugly head. Because, let's not forget, the end times were just around the corner. April 15th, 2023, the end of the world. In Nairobi, families have been going missing for weeks. Neighbors, relatives, nieces and nephews, gone. Just like that. And nobody knew where they went. There were talks about Kilifi County, the neighboring town of Malindi, perhaps the Shakahola Forest, but no one knew for sure. All they knew was that, presumably, a mass exodus was underway. Several people in Nairobi had disappeared and none had returned. While this was happening, one man, whose name is unknown, contacted the police. He claimed that, some weeks ago, his wife and daughter left Nairobi to meet up with Paul Mackenzie on a compound located deep in the Shakahola Forest. Just like the others, they had been gone for some time and never returned. Police were skeptical. After all, if they did go to meet Paul Mackenzie, it made sense why they hadn't come back yet. The cult was famous for encouraging people to uproot their lives. When you went to Paul Mackenzie, you stayed with Paul Mackenzie. However, even with their doubts, the police were required to investigate. So they made the long drive to Shakahola to confront the Good News International Church and bring the mother and the daughter home. When they arrived at the forested compound, they found 15 people hiding away in the brush, but they couldn't avoid being spotted because all 15 of them were completely emaciated, starving, and close to death. And even worse, nearby was a mound of upturned dirt, which officers recognized as a mass grave. The police immediately phoned for backup. Emergency services arrived to save the 15 people. They were so starved and so weak, 4 of them died in transit. On the way, one of the victims explained what had happened. It was the end of the world. In order to see heaven and meet Jesus, Paul had given his flock one final commandment to follow: starve yourself to death. Police officials began searching the commune, which was about twice the size of the country of Monaco, 800 acres, and immediately they began to unearth bodies. The first to be discovered was filled with a dozen children, the next a family of 5, and after that, a family of 6. Backup was not enough. They called in help from every jurisdiction in every nearby region, and together, the massive force began to search. Emaciated survivors were often spotted, but with whatever strength they had, they would try to avoid capture. Some even hindered the investigation by distracting police, blocking off areas, or disguising the graves with foliage. According to survivors, the followers were told to avoid contact with outsiders during the mass starvation, or they would never see heaven. Quote, "The fast will only count if we all gather together. Destroy your earthly documents and join me." As police walked the grounds, they found the corpse of a man in a shallow grave, completely covered in dirt. When they began to exhume him, they saw he was still breathing. The horror was immediate. He had been buried alive. Within 3 weeks, the body count had reached 113. The search had to be briefly halted because nearby hospitals were running out of mortuary space. Bodies were being stacked atop of bodies, and doctors worked around the clock to save survivors. The Red Cross conducted autopsies on the dead, and it was discovered that not everyone had died of starvation. Apparently, Paul had hired a group of armed criminals to execute any followers who attempted to escape the compound. Turns out, not everyone wanted to die for their religion. These people were executed, and those who weren't dying fast enough were similarly executed. Some had been shot, strangled, bludgeoned, and some were even missing organs. After months of searching, heavy rains began to limit any possibility of recovering bodies, so the search was officially called off. And by the end of the investigation, they recovered 429 bodies. The majority of the deaths were children, with women being the next largest group. In total, 95 people were rescued. But that was not everyone. Today, there are still 613 people that were never recovered, and today are still considered missing. But after 2 years, it's safe to say they too were victims of Paul Mackenzie, the Mad Reverend of Shakahola. It's unknown whether that man who called the police ever recovered his wife and daughter. I wish I could say he did, but I don't know. However, I'd like to point out that man is responsible for saving 95 people, many of whom were women and children. So there's one silver lining. Today, Paul Mackenzie is in custody awaiting trial. He faces so many charges, too many to list, from radicalization to manslaughter to straight up religious terrorism. Anything you might expect to see, he's probably being charged with it. As well as Paul, 94 other suspects were arrested in connection with the Shakahola Forest Massacre, many of whom are also awaiting trial. Now, there's so many more details I could talk about, like how 65 of the survivors were almost charged with committing S-word, because apparently that's a misdemeanor in Kenya, or how Paul had a wife who helped execute everything from beginning to end, or the numerous cronies and high-ranking followers who were just as responsible as Paul, but I don't think that's the point I'd like to linger on. I learned a lot about Kenya writing this video. I learned a lot about the people, the government, the innocent families that were destroyed, the economic troubles they've been going through. And writing this video, I can't help but feel for the victims of Paul Mackenzie. Prospectively, over 1,000 people. They were all victims of a failing economy, a corrupt government, completely and utterly vulnerable. And when they found refuge, finally, in religion, they were similarly betrayed. All they wanted was to feel seen and heard and cut out a little bit of heaven for themselves. It's an absolute tragedy. It was completely avoidable and no one is talking about it. The Shakahola massacre has the same death toll as Jonestown, and yet no one seems to really know about this. And I just think, all around, this is one of the saddest stories I have ever covered. My heart is with the Kenyan people. I hope that all of the living victims find closure and go on to live happy, healthy lives, though I don't imagine that'll be easy. I hope they find that. And for all of the dead, I hope they found the peace they were looking for. Welcome to Fiji, Seoul, South Korea, 2014. Every Sunday morning, a sermon begins in an old industrial factory, outfitted with chairs for hundreds of parishioners. The followers arrive, calm and excited, to hear the word of their pastor. They've waited all week to hear the gospel, and today, Sunday, is a holy day for Grace Road Church. When they sit and the room falls silent, a woman walks out, the church leader, their savior. Her name is Shin Ukjo. She's a lifelong preacher with a long history of evangelical teachings, and over the past decade, she spent her time amassing a large following. She claims to be a Christian, but her doctrine is extremist. In South Korea and around the world, she is regarded as blasphemous for her radical doctrine and abusive methodology. Because just like Paul, she built her flock on a pretense, selling the end of the world. She believes that one day, and one day soon, Jesus will return. Armageddon will begin, and the world will be destroyed. In preparation for this, they must cleanse their sinful souls, and they can do that by, you guessed it, giving up all of their earthly possessions, disowning their friends and their families, and pledging a total and absolute submission to Shin. Together, they will join Shin in finding the promised land, where the members of her church, the God-chosen survivors, will develop a farm so as to feed the now starving world and repopulate in Jesus' name. We've seen this one before. And just like Paul, they were facing major scrutiny. After 11 years in operating in South Korea, the people were getting sick of the rhetoric, the trouble, and the pain her church caused them. Families, once again, were torn apart. Friends were never seen again, and if they were avoidant, scared. Followers were beaten in heinous ritual cleansings, and if Sheen didn't find the promised land soon, she was in trouble. So she sent her son, Daniel Kim, to find it. He spends many months traveling all over the world, attempting to find a country with the perfect climate, one that never snows and is always sunny, so they can prepare for the end times. And during this time, the legal troubles begin. Sheen would frequently travel to the Americas to preach, and in early 2014, she landed in Brooklyn, New York. She invites a mentally ill Korean man to join her in New York. He was schizophrenic, and Sheen believed this was a result of his sinful soul. So she invites him to live at her Brooklyn church, revokes his ability to take his schizophrenia medications, and as his condition gets worse, she beats him, ties him to the bed at night, and shoves a sock in his mouth to muffle his screams. This continues for weeks, but her prayers aren't working. She believes he needs more care, so one day, she duct taped him to a chair and began to pray. We don't know the exact details of what happened during this ritual, but once it was done, the man was not only still a schizophrenic, he allegedly had to have his leg amputated because of the injuries he received. Today, he lives in a nursing home as his symptoms became unmanageable after the botched spiritual cleansing. This event sparked a massive civil case in the United States. Shin Uk-ju was being sued for $6 million and was wanted for criminal charges. And although she returned to South Korea, she still was not safe. The US and South Korea have an extradition treaty, so if the states decided to file the paperwork, Shin would be arrested. And who knows how long she'd be arrested for. Right around this time, whether by chance or by design, Sheen's son Daniel discovered the promised land, Fiji. Daniel actually had another destination after his Fijian trip, Nepal, but his flight gets delayed and he takes it as a sign from God. This was where their followers were destined to be. There is, of course, some speculation on whether or not Daniel's story of finding the promised land is actually true. More likely, the spiritual moment was encouraged by growing political pressures and the fear of jail time. That, and there used to be a direct flight from Seoul to Fiji, which meant no layovers and no opportunities to arrest Shin Uk-ju. The perfect escape plan. In 2014, Grace Road Church made an announcement. They have clear evidence that Fiji is the promised land, and within a couple of weeks, Shin Uk-ju and 400 of her followers made the journey to the Fijian island of Viti Levu. Now, it's important to understand that by this point, Shin Uk-ju is incredibly rich, and she doesn't want the reputation of Grace Road Church getting in the way of her mission. She knew that. With all likelihood, if the Fijian people or their government found out that a cult was flying in to set up shop, they would never allow them entry. But Shin Uk-ju was smart. She had a plan. Before the mass immigration, Shin bought up property in Fiji. She began seeding investments in storefronts and land deals, all under the pretense of a South Korean business venture. So when it came time to finally leave Seoul, she and her flock arrived on the island as foreign investors, and the Fijians were none the wiser. As soon as the plane touches down, Shin gets to work. She rounds up her followers and collects their passports. They won't be needing them anymore. Unbeknownst to her followers, by joining her in Fiji, they've agreed to give away their freedom to the Grace Road Church. The first thing on their docket was developing a farm. As per the mission statement, it was the job of Grace Road Church to feed the world once Armageddon came, and Shin had bought enough land to do exactly that. 3.8 hectares, 7 times larger than an American football field, to cultivate rice. They built a workstation, a farmhouse, hire some locals, and begin working the field. Within the year, it's a sprawling, fertile farmland. But Grace Road Church isn't done. Sure, 3.8 hectares worth of rice is a lot of rice, but not nearly enough to sustain the victims of a worldwide apocalypse. In order to do that, they needed more land. And for more land, they needed more money. And once again, Shin Uk-ju had a plan. In 2015, Grace Road Church opened its first restaurant, Grace Road Kitchen. It's located in Suva, the largest city on Viti Levu, and the restaurant is an immediate success. The food is reportedly delicious, the space is clean, the workers are happy, and people spend a lot of money. Given the success of their first business, Grace Road decides to develop more. By the end of 2015, and I'll emphasize that this is the same exact year, they opened 7 unique businesses: Grace Road Kitchen, Noodle Story, Sunny Pizza, Awesome Grill, Fierce Chicken, Snowy House Dessert Cafe, and Pastry Pacifica. They also launched a construction company, Grace Road Construction. With it, they would zone and build whatever businesses they wanted, but also seed into the Fijian government. In 2016, Hurricane Winston tore through the Fijian coastline, destroying houses and property alike. It caused $2 billion Fijian dollars worth of damage. Families were homeless, communities were uprooted, and presumably, it would take years to repair. And during this tragedy, Grace Road, seeing the devastation, offered to rebuild an entire village on the Grace Road dime. They called it the Christian thing to do. I call it tactical. With their new positive reputation, they were able to create a relationship with the then Prime Minister of Fiji, Frank Bainimarama. By the end of 2016, they were adding an extension to the Prime Minister's house, to the tune of $3 million taxpayer dollars. Now, with the government in their pocket, suddenly their expansion became unstoppable. In just another year, Grace Road Church would open a successful chain of supermarkets, mini-marts, beauty salons, dental services, hardware stores, shoe stores, and gas stations. Their restaurants turned from single stores to massive island-wide chains. Their 3.8 hectares of farmland evolved into 800 when they made a land buying deal with the University of Fiji. Together, they grow and sell rice and vegetables, cows and other farm animals for meat, milk, and cheese. They played the game in millions, bank loans, properties, more and more, until the cancer that was Grace Road Church, growing in the heart of Fiji, had become an empire. Their acts of charity, as well as their strong economic prowess, concreted them as indispensable assets to the Fijian people. And now, they were too pervasive to eliminate, too big to regulate, and the allegations of abuse were just beginning. Local Fijians hired to work for Grace Road began to suffer. They'd leave work with bruises because the church's favorite method of discipline was a heavy beating. They're told to avoid hospitals or they'll lose their jobs. Newspapers attempt to interview them, but they always have the same response, quote, "It was an accident. I tripped." And this might sound bad, but for the native South Koreans, their torment is far, far worse. The thrashings begin at night and don't stop until the morning. They are severely beaten in the name of spiritual cleansing. If they try to escape or act out of turn, they're locked away in inescapable rooms. As punishment for the disrespect, children are separated from their parents or beaten for their parents' actions, and then the parents themselves are beaten. These Koreans don't get paid to work for Grace Road. Every South Korean seen in the beauty salons or the supermarkets is an enslaved laborer. A couple of followers have escaped since Grace Road moved to Fiji, but they are few and far between, because other members will personally drag you back to avoid their own lashings. And like I mentioned earlier, the South Korean government was well aware of this, because Grace Road behaved similarly in South Korea, and they had been for a long time. In June of 2018, Shin Uk-ju and a handful of her other close associates were arrested in the Seoul airport in South Korea. She was unaware of the warrant for her arrest and is still in jail today, charged with fraud, violence, child abuse, and more. But that's not the end of the story. Her son, Daniel, continued to work in Fiji, and his regime was just as dangerous and abusive as his mother's. He had the money, the connections, and the power to continue the Grace Road legacy for as long as he wanted. But the South Koreans wanted justice, and so they planned to infiltrate the Grace Road compound in Fiji under the cover of night and arrest David. And that's exactly what they did. 17 South Korean officers working in secret with the local Fijian police would nightly sweep the compound, arresting high-ranking Grace Road thugs, and eventually Daniel Kim. They were ecstatic to finally put Grace Road to bed. But then the unthinkable happened. The Fijian government stepped in and took over. The Koreans were sent home, and Daniel was let go. The governments of the world were outraged. They threatened Fiji with human rights violations and sanctions, and Interpol put out a warrant for Daniel Kim's arrest. The threat was very real. Foreign trade would be tied up in red tape. Their place in the global economy would be revoked, but they did nothing. And you might be thinking, why? There's a cult living in your homeland, and you won't do anything about it? Well, like I said earlier, the truth is, it was too late. They allowed Grace Road to become too powerful. Their businesses were now fully entangled with whole aspects of Fijian life. Let's say they did extradite Daniel, and Grace Road had no leader. Well, then all of their property would be tied up while Daniel is in jail. 50 plus businesses with millions of dollars worth of economic growth shut down in an instant. That means regional economies slow to a halt. All of that property lays empty. If they're paying rent, the rent stops coming in. Their $1 million loans go unpaid. The cost of living goes up. 100 plus local Fijians lose their jobs, and all in all, the Fijians are worse for wear. Grace Road Church put the Fijian government in a chokehold. They kick out the cult, their nation takes the hit. They keep them, and their nation also takes the hit. It's a lose-lose situation, and so they chose to do nothing. And Grace Road Church paid the Prime Minister a pretty penny to do nothing. In 2023, a new Prime Minister took over, the leader of the opposition, Sitiveni Rabuka, in coordination with the South Korean government. They began cracking down on Grace Road. 2 high-ranking members of the church are deported and arrested, and Daniel goes on the run. But other than that, nothing much has changed. As of 2026, the businesses continue to operate, they continue to rake in money, and whatever is happening to their followers and employees, we simply don't know. Presumably, they've calmed down with all of their beatings and abuses, but they deny taking the passports and say their followers are free to go anytime, which, as we know, is allegedly unlikely. Today, in 2026, the Fijian government is still in a tough position. Many civilians are in support of Grace Road. The truth is, for all of the evil Grace Road has done, it's a massive economic contributor to Fiji. They employ over 100 locals, probably more by now, keep the blood pressure of the Fijian dollar high, and produce so many goods and exports. It would be impossible to destroy the institution entirely. In that way, Shin Okju was brilliant. She made sure that her church would have its claws so deep in Fiji, they could never pull her out. And so far, as we can tell, they won't be able to anytime soon. And currently, Shin Okju is serving a prison sentence in South Korea for her crimes as the founder of Grace Road, while her son Daniel remains at the helm of their Fiji enterprises, wanted by international authorities, but currently not in custody. And alright guys, that wraps up some horrifying unknown cults. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I mean, the first cult was truly so horrifying. And yeah, I just think it's crazy that I've never heard of these cults before, and I assume you guys haven't either. So comment down below your thoughts, and please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know. Follow me on Instagram and follow me on Spotify. I appreciate it so much. And if you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you'll enjoy other videos on the channel, so go check out those. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. It means the world. You guys are the best community on YouTube, hands down. And this was Snook, and I'll see you next time. Bye.